I will call this meeting to order and do recognize we gather and meet on the traditional territory of the LHTAKO DENE Nation. Just a couple of odds and sods on the agenda. I would ask council over the next little while, remember we are in a transition window with respect to staffing. And so as Rita learns the job, Gina passes off, and Laura takes over Ria's job, there's going to be some transition stuff going on. So with respect to the agenda, the actual adoption of the regular minutes is for February 2nd, not February 4th, as stated in your agenda. And then Ria, maybe you could just explain, I've got a note respecting the special council meeting minutes of February 10th. Is there an amended version of that? Is that?
Yes, I sent it electronically. The only issue on there was the resolution numbers were wrong, so those were corrected. Okay, so there you got a different version of that with the resolution numbers corrected. And then my error, I thought I sent my very short summary of the PSP to Ria last week, and I didn't, so she got it from me today. But again, with respect to late agenda items, just a reminder to all council, if it requires substantive debate, if it has new information, or if it requires a decision of council, we will stand the item down if it's late, as opposed to advancing it. If you're getting a late report, etc., it's because it's just an information only, or it's a nominal piece and we just keep moving the agenda forward. So those are the three I've got: the change in the date for the regular council, the amended minutes with the different numbering, and then late small report on PSP. Is that correct? That's right.
Okay. So with that, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Paul so moved. Councillor Elliott second. Anyone opposed? That motion has carried. And then we're going to move right into delegations, and that's where the other Scott can turn their video on.
Excuse me, Mayor, we got to do the minutes.
Oh, sorry. It's my mistake. Is because we were talking about the minutes. I was thinking we had adopted them. So adopting the minutes of the February 2nd meeting. Motion to adopt, Councillor Goulet, Councillor Rudenberg. Anyone opposed? And then the motion to adopt the amended February 10 special open meeting minutes. Councillor Goulet, Councillor Vic. Anyone opposed? Carried. Okay, now Scott, you can show us your lovely face, and the floor is yours.
Well, I haven't been described as lovely for a long time.
Well, I didn't see you quite clearly last time, so.
This is normally the time I get to travel, and there's not a lot of that going on these days, but it's neat to see the different backgrounds. I see some people are using generic. That's kind of interesting. I've got, thank you very much for inviting me. I've got, let me just make sure you can see my screen. One thumb up. Yeah, okay. I've got about 5 slides I'll go through quickly on an overview, then about 10 slides, which are just about the assessment role, and then just a little bit I'd like to touch on about our website. It's very pertinent this time of year. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. We can't see the shared screen.
Okay. That did not work. Let's try this.
Ray, you can do it for him if he doesn't.
I'm gonna try this.
There we go.
There we go.
How's that? Better?
Perfect.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay. So I've got about, I was saying, I got about 5 slides on the overview, just a little bit of background on BC assessment. I'm not sure how much experience people have or are familiar with us. I think most are very familiar. Then about 10 slides about the 2021 assessment role. They'll spend most of the time, and then a little bit about our website, because it's the right time of year, find information and direct people in that to our website when they have questions. First thing is about BC assessment. We were established in '74 by an all parties committee. The whole idea then was to bring independence to the assessment side of the equation and the taxation side of the equation, or the tax setting side of the equation. And that's basically been our function since 1974. I think we're one of the oldest divisions or crowns that's been around in BC. So our job is to provide uniform and fair property assessments. That's what we do. What we produce in the assessment role is an ownership of every property, the value, the classification, and the tax liability. That's what their exemption is. That's our main role when we produce the assessment role. And of course, it's used to raise property taxes across the province. I think anywhere for most municipalities, we're in the 40 to 80% range, I think, of some municipalities when it comes to raising revenues. There's two basic types of way we go about our work when it comes to valuing properties. We have the market value properties and we have non-market value properties. Most of us are actually the biggest advantage to what we do and the fact that it's based on market value is most people understand it. They understand a market value and they understand the value of the properties and their holdings. So all the properties that we're familiar with, we see every day, those are pretty much done on market value. Non-market properties are all the unusual type properties typically, and they're usually done on legislated rates or some similar form. So any major industrial properties, sawmills and so on, they'll be done on a cost manual that's legislated. All the long and skinny things in the province, similar. Farmland, for example, that's done on a rate based on a soil capability. So if you see a land assessment and it's in farm class, it's going to be a fraction of what its market value is. Things of that nature. But those are two main groupings of how we go about coming up with values. Now on the classification side, classification is based entirely on use. You could have an old school that's sold and somebody used as a residence, and we have had, and it's going to be in class 1, right? It's based on use, not the zoning. Largest portion is definitely residential, probably 80%, maybe more, maybe up to 85 even, of properties in the province either are all residential or a portion of them are residential. Then you have utilities, again, long skinny things, BC Hydro, things like that, certain pipelines, etc. Supportive housing is a very small classification of property. I believe Quesnel has one for the first time this year in that classification. It's designated by the province what properties fall in there. Major industry, or it's guided by the province, I should say. It used to be specifically designated, now it's guided. Major industry is your sawmills and so on, mines, things of that nature, anything that's done on those cost manuals. Class 5 is a very small class of properties. It's kind of an anomaly. When we think of light industrial, most people think of warehousing sections and so on. No, those are business and other. Light industry is essentially manufacturing that doesn't meet the major industrial classification. And all major industry is based on some type of capacity or volume of product and so on. So light industry might be a small sawmill that doesn't meet the capacity for major industry classification. Business and other is a catch-all. It's everything else, and it's everything we see that we're sitting in and so on. It's pretty broad. Usually it's the second largest in any municipality, other than some of our smaller towns where major industry is. Managed forest land, of course, is just forest land that has a formal process in place to manage it and fill in the required reporting information. Recreation nonprofit, again, this is a bit of an anomaly too. This is a very small classification of property. Recreational is large tracts of land, usually in the rural property. It's not what we think of when you have your property at the lake. No, those are all class 1. Nonprofit would be like the churches, things like that. That's what's going to be in that category. Farmland, of course, you won't have that many. I think you've got a couple, and anything that's classified as farm, and you have to apply for that, and you have to meet the income requirements, and you have to maintain farm activity. A bit about the assessment cycle. Of course, right now we've sent out the assessment, everyone's assessment, beginning of January. We spent all of January taking inquiries and complaints and so on from people. Now we're going through the actual semi-formal process of having review panels, and that's all done by phone this year. So the review panels are going on, and they'll go on right to the middle of March. After that is done, all the keying will take place and so on, and then the revised assessment roll will come out. So any changes that took place as a result of the review panels will be in the revised assessment. Municipalities will readjust their rates if they did some preliminary work based and use the revised assessments. Completed assessment roll will essentially become meaningless. So then after that, we essentially start our work again in April. We start looking at new construction again. We go over the things that we learned from the previous roll, from all the inquiries that we got and the complaints that we got. We start doing our roll quality enhancement and so on. And then we're back to producing the roll again. And then the defense process and so on. All during this time, if anybody isn't satisfied with the results of the review panel, they can go to the next level, the Property Assessment Appeal Board. And those can be heard all year round, right? And there's some going on right now. And anything on our assessment roll, just to touch on one date there, we look at what was physically on the property at October 31st. And we use July 1st valuation date. So backwards valuation date. But we have to have a date to say, okay, whatever was there at this date, that's what's going on next year's assessment roll. So if something was plunked on there November 1st, a building, like drove up and dropped it, it wouldn't hit it till the next roll. This is provincial. If you have a copy of this, I just noticed there was a typo on the value of the provincial assessment roll. The number of properties did increase this past year, and that's pretty common. Up about 1%. The value of the provincial assessment roll went up almost 4% to 2.01 trillion. I don't know how I got that 12 got in there, but it's a 2.01 trillion. Non-market change is down compared to the previous year. We'll talk more about this. Non-market change is something most municipalities pay a lot of attention to. Your finance department will. It's primarily new construction, but it can also be the demolitions. It also includes any property class changes. So any property that went from one class to another, any type of zoning changes that resulted in value, new subdivisions and so on. That's all included in non-market change. But for the most part, it is new construction or demolitions, what have you. Now, this is essentially your assessment roll. I'm going to show you two. I'm sure you can, I hope you can see my mouse.
Yep.
There's an actual assessment roll and there's a general assessment roll. The actual includes the valuation of all the property before any exemptions are applied. What municipalities are more interested in would be the next slide, which shows all exemptions taken out. That's what you apply your tax rates against. So you can see right here overall how things have changed in each one of these classes. We'll talk more in each class on the next slide. But this shows just the straight what's on the face of the assessment roll. This is the values there. And you see overall, the assessment roll is up a couple percent. Now, this is general. So this is more pertinent to what finance would be looking at and so on, and what the taxes would be based on. So it's basically taking that actual, cut off anything that's exempt, and this is what you're going to apply your tax rates against. Typically not a huge difference, except when it comes to some of the non-rec property, the class 8 and so on. You can see here, class 8, the only taxable value in there is $114,000. The assessment's $14 million, right? So that's mostly an exempt. Schools, churches, and so on would be in there. So there's no value to tax on, very little. So residential, you can see a change of 4%, up 4%. And that includes all residential. Apartments, strata, single family, you name it. You can see utilities. Utilities are down 19%. And that's a large sum. That's going to have an impact. And that is directly related to the valuation of railway line. It's tonnage drop that traveled through that line, so its assessment drops accordingly. It's an interesting way for a non-market property to be valued as it fluctuates, right? It can fluctuate significantly. Most things change modestly. Major industry, no real change. Major industry gets a market factor and it gets depreciation. So depending on where the age of improvements are, you can see that change a little bit. Light industry, that's up significantly, but again, if you notice, it's only the whole classification is only 11 million. I believe that was one large building that was, I can't remember the name who built that, and I'm not sure if it's even completely finished, but that's essentially the impact of one building, right? Business and other, the next highest one, no real large change either way, slight decrease overall. Rec nonprofit, again, not much there. Farm, much, I can't remember if that was 1 or 2 properties you have. And then the last one there is section 644 of the Local Government Act. That's like utilities running in the municipality that do not get taxed based on this dollar amount. They get taxed based on their revenue. So the distribution lines for gas, let's say, we don't have assessment for individual distribution lines within the town of a gas line going to every house. So what they pay on is they'll report to the municipality a certain amount of business that they did there, and they'll pay a % on that. Or your finance department be familiar with that. This is complicated, but I'm only going to touch on a couple of things. I'm just going to point out this here. Because we talk a lot of different numbers, things don't, depends on what you're looking at. They're all going to be slightly different. But all this one shows is the non-market change I talk about, or the new construction or removals and so on, and the market change. And there's the total change. So it basically just shows the both. So if you're looking for just what the market has done, you know, there's a column there where we can illustrate that. Residential, just looking at market, 3.68% up, right? So you can see how that changes in each one of these different classifications. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it's interesting to note that that overall change is made up of 2 parts, the non-market change and the market. This is just your completed roll, like your general values. This is your taxable values. So you can see your roll since 2012, the total amount, the total taxable value, almost at 1.2 billion now, right? From 2012, we had about 9, under 1 billion. So distribution of value change. I bring this up because I know it's a lot to look at here, but basically what it's saying here is in each one of these groupings. So this is a change of minus 15% to minus 25%. 12 properties fall into that category under the single family residential. So 12 properties have decreased between 15 and 25%. Now, the reason I show this is because this is pretty common. This distribution here, we always publish what the average is. That's usually what people see and usually what people are interested in. And then we often talk about, well, how does that impact my taxes? Well, it's important that people know what that average is to compare whether their value is shifted, and it will have an impact on taxes. When there's a 15% change in value, let's say, that does scare people and think there's a 15%, will that result in 50% taxes? And the answer is no, it's going to result in whatever the municipality decides their needs and revenue is, and it's usually much smaller, right? So the work that we do, all that distribution outside the average are shifts, and people will be impacted by our work. And that's where those questions should be passed directly onto us. That's where we can answer those questions quite readily. If you look at, like I think we were saying, single family dwellings was around the 5%, right? So there's a majority of the properties from 0 to 10. If you go one bracket outside, you're probably going to get 70% or higher of the properties, and that's pretty common. So most properties change in that range. Anything outside of that, you know, it can be a significant shift, and those would be, we encourage people to talk to us because it's all directly related to the work we did, not the taxes. Taxes are going to change, you know, if the average is 5%, your home changed 5%, whatever the increased mill rate is or taxes that the municipality reports out, that's what you can expect. If you didn't change the average, it's going to be impacted by our work, and we should be the ones answering those questions. This is the residential volume, just for interest. This just goes from January to December. When we close rolls, we will often do some time adjustments and go previous years too, if we need to, for different property types. We pay attention to MLS sales and all sales as well. So we look at, you know, what private transactions there might be and so on. Were they arm's length transactions? And then we'll decide if we use those in the mix of setting values or not. And here you can see the average class, average sale price for each month. And there's quite a fluctuation, but that's to be expected when there's, you know, the volume of sales are where they are. But overall, you can see a modest increase. And we start here, right, July 1st, and then we look months on each side. Volume of sales, do we need to time adjust? So you can see even now, if you're just looking at average, our valuation date is July 1st. We don't send notices out till about here, right? So often there's a little bit of a delay, right? So our assessments are typically behind. Our values are typically in the typical moving market. We're behind a bit by the time the assessment notices come out. Now this shows complaint process, what we're going through right now, the appeals to the review panel. Our target is we try to shoot for less than 2%, right? Keep it under 2%. You can see the blue is the provincial line, the north region, that's north of, that's south, just south of 100 Mile House and north, that's our region. And then there's Quesnel in the green. Now, typically residential is around the 1%, typically 0.8, 1.2, somewhere in there in any given year. And commercial can be as high as 5-6%, depending on the year or market movement, what's going on. But overall, we try to keep it under 2%. This is just gives you a little bit of an idea of assessed values across the region, how things have changed this past year. See Burns Lake and Smithers up there, surprisingly Northern Rockies, but they took significant hits for the last few years. There are decreases, sorry. And you can see at the other end, Mackenzie, Fort St. James, where you'd expect the larger decreases. And then just a sample of across the province, you know, Vancouver after, you know, a slow start in the year, sales wise and volume wise, the whole province was volume wise was back up to previous year and higher in many cases. And values for the most part across the province have increased. You can see a few there, Fort St. John down slightly, and Kitimat. So now we'll go on to, this is our website. The nice thing about this is you can enter in any address right here and you can get information on any property in the province. There's maps on here and a bit of other information that you can look at. This is just curiosity information, but you can go on a map of the province now and you can zoom in on any property and you can get the typical changes. If there's enough volume or if there's enough sale volume, you can get the assessment typical change by neighborhood. Most of our smaller communities up north, you won't be able to get that because there's not enough volume in there. But here's an example of some of the information that you can get on any property in the province. Rural is a little more challenging, but you can get the photos of pretty much any property in municipalities. And you can see you get the year built, some of the description, the size of property, and so on. From this, you can also look at a map on where it's located. You can look at neighboring properties. You can ask for, give me a sample of what's sold around me, and they'll do the best it can on finding the properties nearest to what have sold. And it's a great way for people to go on and check to see if their assessments is reasonable compared to the neighbors and to see if their assessments reasonable compared to what transactions have been taking place in the neighborhood. I'll just leave that up for a minute if you have any questions. If you have.
Yeah, Scott, I actually need you to unshare your screen. Otherwise, I can't see all of council.
Okay.
I need my Brady Bunch back. Okay, council, floor is open. Councillor Paul?
Yes, thank you, Scott, for your presentation. I have a question, and I think you kind of answered it on slide 11, and it has to do with sales history. And I'll give you an example. I purchased a house in West Quesnel a couple of years ago for substantially less than assessed value because it was a fixer-upper. I fixed it up. It's back up to where it should be relative to the assessed value. But when I go into the sales history on your website, it says that there were no sales in the last 3 years. And so what I'm getting at is that the real purchase price of that property is not revealed. Is there a reason for that?
Yes. It means we rejected that sale as, what can happen is when we review sales and we look at it and we say, is this a typical transaction for the market or an arm's length transaction? And if it's an arm's length transaction, does it match what we have? And so on. So we kind of do a review on it. And if there was something unusual about the transaction, or we needed to do an inspection to get it accurate, we don't want that information out there. We call it a reject sale. Now, what should have happened, could have happened though, is what typically should happen is we probably would have got that re-inspection done, and then in the next rendition of updates to the system, it should have come up. But yes, there is reason why some things will not show up. And it just means that we didn't use that sale when we were setting values. We probably didn't know how bad a shape it was in as if you bought a fixer-upper.
Okay. Other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any, Scott. Scott, I think this was great. The only question that I've got, because we keep doing the splaining and you sort of intimated the difference between assessment and taxation, because that often is a problem for our constituents. You know, even in years where council zero tax, you'll get people who are above the median or the average taxation who their taxes go up. Is there anywhere on the BC assessment site that is also explained so that they don't have to just, you know, take us at face value?
Yeah, it is on. If you go to that BC assessment site, there's I couldn't point you directly to it. There is a difference between taxes and an assessment. And I, you know, it's probably best send them to us. We can explain why.
Well, our staff do a good job downstairs doing that, but I think to the city manager, I think it might be worthwhile as, you know, we sort of beef up our communication, et cetera. If there's also an explanation from BC assessment that we build that into our communications. And then there's just a third party validation for what our staff are often saying to folks downstairs. Carrie?
I just wanted to say BC Assessment actually has some great little videos, and we have put them on our Facebook page that explain all this stuff.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
Great. Lori, is that what you were just going to mention that? Is that?
I was also going to say that the LGLA website, one of our board members actually is a BC assessment person. And last year he did a really great PowerPoint presentation. So it's there for even local government people to understand so that they can explain it to our constituents. So there is lots of stuff out there, like Carrie said.
Yeah. And I know, Scott, that we'll often field the kind of the first queries around, you know, why did my assessment go up or all of that stuff. And I know staff punt them to you guys to address that. So, okay, I don't see any other comments or questions from council. So Scott, any parting words?
We also have small sessions we can do on digging into how we do the valuations. There's things we can do for your staff as well, your admin staff. If they have any questions at all, we're glad to put things together on the fly as well.
Good, super. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us tonight. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll sign off now.
Yeah, thanks. Moving on to our regular business then, on to committee reports, Policy and Bylaw Committee. Councillor Runge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report is informed council of what was discussed at the last Policy and Bylaw Committee meeting on February 4th. So the first thing that we talked about were road speeds through Johnston Sub, and we had discussion with Director Thomas, and I think I'm going to leave it at that, where it turns out that he'll be speaking to us later in this meeting. So we decided it would just be more beneficial to visit this issue at a council meeting with the input of full council, and that's why he's coming to us today. Number two, the council procedure bylaw for electronic meetings. The Policy and Bylaw Committee generally agreed that the draft electronic meeting amendments for the council procedure bylaw 1898 should go forward to council for consideration and approval. And our recommendation is that we have first and second readings of Council Procedure Bylaw 1898 as attached in our agenda here. The third thing that we covered was the City of Quesnel's reconciliation initiatives and partnerships with local First Nation governments. And I've listed the 3 points that we discussed all the time. This agenda item was stood down at our meeting. Once again, it was really felt, with the importance, the scope and the layers of all the related material, that it would be important for all of council to be privy to the information and to have open discussions on all the information. And those points, I guess maybe I should add them here because we're on video, to consider signing on to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Number 2, to develop and adopt an anti-racism strategy for the City of Quesnel. And number 3, to conduct anti-racism sensitivity training and improve the knowledge of staff and council regarding the local Indigenous culture and history. Once again, that will come to us at a future date. Our action was that it's been referred to council strategic planning, tracking spreadsheet for future discussions. And then we also had an in-camera, and we moved in and out for land dispositions. And I guess we'll go to, the next meeting is March 4th, and anyone's welcome to attend. Do we move right on to I have to go through both ones here, sorry. So I think if willing, we'd like to have the recommendation for first and second readings of the procedure bylaw 1898.
Yeah, we'll deal with the, Councillor, we just deal with the bylaw readings in the bylaw section because it's up in that section.
I'm sorry.
Take any questions that people may have at this time.
So yeah, if there's any questions, please forward them. That'd be wonderful.
Councillor Paul?
Yeah, thank you. With regard to the procedure bylaw as it relates to electronic meetings, I maybe missed it, but I didn't see anything in there that spoke to what the process would be if the electronic link was to fail mid-meeting.
It's in there.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Albert.
Under the proposed amendments, you have 10 minutes to sign back in. And if you are not signed back in within 10 minutes, then you're deemed to have permanently exited the meeting.
I think Councillor Paul is talking in the general sense, though. Like
Yeah.
If generally we had a systems failure.
Thank you.
With everyone, you mean?
Yeah, so the Zoom, stops or freezes up or anything like that. I think the same 10-minute rule would apply of trying to get everybody back on, wouldn't it?
Yes, and also I think if there was like a power outage or something like that, then we would try to get everybody on the teleconference line.
So we may want to put a clarification in there. I think it is a fair comment if we're 100% electronic, what is the fallback should something happen, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So we
Mayor,
can, go ahead.
If I could, another situation we may need that should be addressed in here as well is the what happens if a councillor needs to recuse himself from a topic of conversation. And Gina and I were just talking about it, and I think the right answer in that case would be for the councillor to actually log right off Zoom, and then we could email him when he could come back onto Zoom once that item is dealt with. But they have to completely leave, right? They can't just, it's got to be the audio and the video's got to be gone.
So there's a couple of things here, and I think we can just stand down the bylaw. I think, again, this is committee work and now council's looking at it. We've also had some experience since this has evolved. So one is, what about a catastrophic failure? What's our fallback? And even what's the fallback to the fallback, right? So, if it's a full catastrophic event, for example, we're holding a meeting and then we get an evacuation order. We've been, not that far away from that circumstance. So not just the electronic side, but this is speaking about electronics. So what if the chair comes off? We've had in a joint committee meeting with Councillor Rudenberg in the chair where her side froze. Now in that case, because it's two chairs, there's a co-chair situation, there is a default. So there's a bit of a question around what happens if the chair comes off. And then I think that the third question is the one you're raising about recusing. And I guess council, I mean, my sense would be text is probably a
Okay.
speedier way to just let people know that they can come back on again than email. Not everybody would have as rapid access necessarily to the email, but a text they would. So the presumption would be everybody's got their cell phone at the ready, and then the corporate officer, somebody texts them and says that item's over. Councillor, or sorry, City Manager?
So, Mr. Mayor, just for clarity, then that situation, it's possible could happen tonight with some of the items, with
Right.
one of the items later on in the meeting, so.
Yeah, there's a couple of
That-
potential ones, so
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Exactly.
Okay. So we can go back and do some redrafting on that, and when we get to the bylaw section, we'll just stand it down and keep working on it.
Sounds good.
And you guys, thank you so much for the input prior to this.
Yeah, and you do note that we are not recommending the use of these virtual backdrops. And it was interesting to see Scott from BC Assessment's response that it looks like you guys are using some of those virtual backdrops. I mean, I live on Zoom these days. Nobody uses these virtual backdrops for a variety of reasons because they get quite draining with how people fade in and out and disappear, and depending on what they're wearing, how they blend into the backdrop. So we're just going to go. You guys decide. You know, Councillor Paul's got a blank wall behind him. Scott doesn't want anybody jealous, so he's hiding a big fish or something up in behind him. You know, but we can all pick a backdrop that's you know, simple enough for people to see. Okay, so good with that. Any other questions on Councillor Runge's PABCOM report? Okay. Moving on to the next item then is just a quick update from Public Safety and Policing Committee. We did have a meeting of the committee. You know, we got an update on the SAFER program. We got an update on where we're at on the situation table. There were a couple of items that we're going to track forward. One being, as we move down the reconciliation path, the UNDRIP and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it kind of begs the question of that particular standing committee and its relation with our First Nations. So our staff sergeant pointed out that they do have 2 Aboriginal relations full-time constables. They're paid for by the federal government. Their vehicles have the band logos of the 4 bands that they articulate with, and they spend the lion's share of their time at the reserves and working directly with the First Nations. And on occasion, the staff sergeant does have a chief's meeting. And so as an example, when that situation at the mall occurred, the staff sergeant made himself available to meet with some of the chiefs to discuss that. But we did feel, and we're just going to work it through our dialogue on the UNDRIP and reconciliation, that this is a committee we should give some consideration to have a direct linkage to our Aboriginal community from that public safety and policing side of things. And so we'll just take a look at it. We have, because it's a standing committee, there are issues with respect to membership of council versus membership of non-council members. We have to keep the majority of council, but can't have a council quorum. So we would have to make an adjustment in the current membership, but we think we can sort that out. So that's something for council to consider when we come back to this whole reconciliation discussion. And we did take a look at the crime stats. We are trending in the right direction, but what we're going to do is get the staff sergeant to come in and talk to us in more detail about the stats, because there's some changes in the background on how the police do their business that have changed also the statistics. And so we thought that it's better just to bring him to council and have him go through what the strategic plan is for the upcoming year, and then where we're at on these trend lines on our crime statistics. So we'll be arranging that. And as you'll see at the bottom of the report, we're going to have an ad hoc meeting outside our schedule in order for the staff sergeant to go through the plan that he will be submitting for our community as part of his requirements for his annual planning cycle. So that's my report from PSP. And questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's interesting about the two officers that are directed towards the First Nations and paid federally. So that's above and beyond our contingent that obviously we're paying for.
Yeah, similar to the provincial component is above and beyond our contingent too, but they operate out of the detachment.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on then. Council reports and discussion items. So there is a reconsideration report in front of council. And because this is the first time this reconsideration has been exercised directly by the mayor, and there's another alternate way for reconsideration that can be undertaken by council, I've asked Ms. Albers to use it as a little bit of a teachable moment for both us and for the public as to how this right of reconciliation can be exercised. And so I would give the floor over to Gina.
Thank you, Mayor. A council member who voted with the majority of council can put forward a motion for council to reconsider a previously voted resolution. However, this must occur at the very next council meeting from when the voted motion occurred. And then under section 131 of the community charter, a mayor has some special privileges around this. So a mayor can bring forward a reconsideration motion at the same meeting the voted resolution took place, or within 30 days following that meeting where the voted resolution took place. There are certain exceptions where council cannot reconsider a matter, such as a matter has received approval by the electors or assent by the electors. A matter has already been reconsidered, so you can't reconsider something that's already been reconsidered. It can only be reconsidered once. A matter has been acted on by an officer, employee, agent of the city of Quesnel. So I don't know, do you want me to go on further, Mayor?
No, that's good. And Councillor Rudenberg called me because there's a little bit of dissonance between Robert's rules, which only speak to the council initiated reconsideration. It's the community charter that then gives the mayor a special right of reconsideration that you wouldn't see in the Robert's rules. So there is that opportunity. So what I wanted council to be aware of is if you've, had a second thought about something and you would like it reconsidered, you also have the right of, you would work it with us into the agenda. So there shouldn't be any surprises. You would ask for an agenda item and then you would have to seek a motion for that reconsideration, whereas the mayor has the right to bring something back to council. Okay. Any questions on reconsideration before I get into the substance of this particular item? Not seeing any? Okay, super, thank you. So upon reflection after our last discussion, I just felt that the discussion on the particular item kind of got off on a track right from the get-go that caused us to misunderstand potentially how the question and the initiative was being positioned, both relative to our strategic planning, relative to our waterfront development strategy, and also relative to our budget. So this is not a increment to budget issue. And I think that was missed at the last meeting. This is how does council want to spend money it sets aside for these very things. So that $40,000 would come out of council initiatives, which upon approval of this year's budget would have $141,000 sitting in it. So that's one reference to keep in mind. And if we're not spending on these kinds of things, I think council really needs to ask the question of why we putting council initiatives money aside. We're putting it aside explicitly for these kinds of initiatives so that we don't deal with it as a budget item. We deal with it as a strategic spending of money targeted for these very things to advance our transition strategy, to advance things like our waterfront development, to advance trails, etc. The second piece is there was a bit of a strange logic
embedded in the conversation that we shouldn't do a feasibility study in case something isn't feasible. And it reminded me when I reflected on it that I've had this long-standing discussion and argument over the years as MLA and even before that as a consultant, where one of the biggest places that people seem to get surprised that you can get to know is environmental assessment processes. And when you talk about the millions of dollars in the years, tens of millions of dollars in the years that go into environmental assessment, you still have to be willing to accept a no as an answer. And that's the case with the feasibility study. So for example, we have a trails strategy that has a lot of trail opportunities embedded in it. In some cases, we are not going to be successful in those trails. We're not going to be successful for a variety of reasons. In fact, we went down the path and expended, a lot of energy working with LHTAKO on an expansion to our trails network from West Fraser Timber Park out to Plywood. But at the 11th hour and 59th minute, LHTAKO felt that they weren't ready to advance that to a grant funding stage. So feasibility studies inherently are all about the potential of it not being feasible. And that logic sort of, I don't think works for saying no to something. The other piece of this is the liability question raised, again, is a question all of us should internalize. It's really something that our staff deal with. If our staff feel that prima facie, something that we're contemplating should not be sustained, we'll be told. If it is something that can be covered under our normal liability, like Rockosaurus on Dragon Mountain, or like the proposed bike park we've got going in behind the rec center, etc., staff will do the due diligence around covering off the liability issues for us. And then the other piece in this is that really, this is a set piece in our waterfront development strategy, unanimously adopted by council. So it begs the question, if not now, when? This is 100% funding for 100% work by consultants who are appropriate to this. That's why it's that price point of 40K, is to get it all done by the people who know this stuff, can do this stuff, and can bring forward to us a reasoned plan that should be ticking the boxes of the regulatory agencies. Without that work being done, going to the regulatory agencies without us actually being able to answer the question, what are you intending to do, or what are you proposing to do, as I said at the last meeting, is just a get to know. We have to actually be able to answer their question of, what are we proposing? Have we considered all of the issues that we can project are going to be issues for them? And do we have ways to mitigate or address those? So I would suggest to council, because some of the logic I heard was, well, maybe we should delay this, or maybe we should wait until something, further down the line, etc. As I said, this is a set piece in our plan. It's going to be a long burn, like the BC Parks mountain bike park on Dragon Mountain was. Like all the work we did on the Wonderland Trail System, it's really probably a 2 to 5 year window of even making this possible. And as we build the RV park, as we develop the Riverfront Trail, and as we have this as a set piece in there, I think we just have to do the work. So the reason I'm suggesting council reconsider it is because A, we have an adopted waterfront strategy that has these as a fundamental set piece. B, it's not a budget issue. It's a consideration of our council initiative funding, which is specifically for these kinds of projects. And C, if not now, then I suggest council revisit whether they would ever feel comfortable advancing this particular project for the reasons that was stated at the last meeting. So my suggestion to council is to revisit the recommendation. And I would invite, a motion to put forward the 40,000 at some point, but I'd like to, Councillor Rudenberg, you're moving that. Councillor Elliott second, okay. So that motion is now being reconsidered and the motion is back on the floor again. Questions, comments?
Seeing none, Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely took this opportunity with seeing this on the agenda to really consider this and enhance my own knowledge of what we're undertaking. And I'm certainly not opposed to the principle of this feature. And in fact, in my research, I think the community could really benefit from such a unique opportunity, which from my research does not exist in this province in a man-made capacity. So on that front, I'm all in on this idea, and I want to support the project. I guess it comes down to is $40,000 the right amount of money to do the research to see if it's feasible. And I guess without stymieing the motion or getting in the way, I would just ask that we look to other communities, specifically in Alberta, that have done feasibility studies. They already have working documents in front of councils in Calgary. There is a nonprofit society formed in Alberta that supports river standing waves. So I guess what I would hope or recommend is we approach these groups, individuals, and see what first steps they took in approaching regulatory bodies, approaching the community, building a community to support a feature like this. In Alberta, they have whole river surfing groups that take advantage of the feature, but also they travel to take advantage. So I guess that's all I would say is I will support the motion, but I would just ask that we go beyond our borders before we hire a consultant. I think there's a willingness in other communities, in other groups, that they would share that knowledge freely to perhaps save us some steps and, more importantly, save us some money.
So Councillor Vic, point noted, but really you're still asking staff to do a lot of work at a time that our economic development department is very busy in a lot of other things. And the staff recommendation is to hire the consultants to do the work. And I can guarantee you where they've got that in the river in Alberta is going to be fundamentally different than a salmon river in British Columbia, that it's as active a river as what we've got. But I think council should always know that the recommendation from staff comes with a lot of the forethought that you're suggesting, and also comes with up to 40,000. That's the price point. Staff will always work to try and get that down a little bit. So, you know, either the city manager or Amy, I'd ask you to speak to the point, but, you know, your point's noted. Yeah, there's an example over there. We will certainly be looking at the example, but this is an intent to get this burden off of staff to some people that can run with this project. So EDO.
Sure, yeah, so we have had some contact with folks in Alberta, I think from the nonprofit society already, and their interest is piqued in what we're doing. I think they caught wind of it from the waterfront plan, and so they were interested in, and contact will continue there as we move forward, and we can get advice, of course. So always look to what other communities have done first to see how we can learn from them and build off of that. But as Mayor said, it's the capacity and the staff time to really dig into that we just don't have. And so that's where we need to look to some outside help, which will cost a bit of money to really dig in and provide us with direction to move forward.
City manager, did you want to add? I can't see you back there, way at the end of the table.
Off.
There you go.
Okay, so I first said I have nothing to add to it, but now I do change my mind when I had that 1 second. So what I would like to add is I would like for council to all consider what we have put out there as the City of Quesnel brand. It's in our nature. And we have in front of council, it's too bad we're not sitting at council chambers because we would see this lovely card in front of each desk to remind us before we make each decision, how does this fit within our brand? And I think this is a perfect example of an innovative thing that fits within our brand. I think it fuels our purpose of enriching lives through natural opportunities. I think it enables opportunities for a thriving community by bringing people in specifically to use this feature. I think it's definitely naturally courageous. And most importantly, I think it's trailblazing, sustainable, fun, and will be accessible for the average person to be able to go out onto the river and use it. To me, that's what this brand is all about, is these types of activities. And I think for us to say no to it would be in some ways a rejection of our brand that we've made promises around. Thank you.
Okay. And then I'm not, Councillor Elliott, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm very happy that this has been brought forward for reconsideration, because as the city manager has mentioned and is always on Amy's mind for sure, it falls definitely within our brand and trailblazing and moving forward. The only way in my mind to actually be able to move it forward is to have the feasibility study done and done correctly. We need professionals to do this, because you're going to be dealing with DFO, and as the mayor says, with salmon migration, rainbow trout, everything in there. So it's got to be done right, but it fits with everything that we're doing as far as the riverfront project and our tourism, all the work we've done with the mountain biking trails, the RV park where it's going to be as compared to the possibility of the standing wave. I think it's absolutely exceptional for us to be the first community in BC to be moving forward with this, because as I mentioned, living on the Sunshine Coast, the amount of people that go to that Skookumchuck wave, they're from all over the world, and they've got to hike in for an hour with their gear to do it, and people absolutely flock from everywhere to be a part of it. To that note as well, I mean, there are challenges with it. It's extremely dangerous. So you know, the liability question is there as well, but it's, you know, there's obviously not a challenge to Egmont or the Sunshine Coast Regional District, or they would have shut it down a long time ago. So once again, I'm glad to have this reconsidered. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just a final comment. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Paul, and then I'll make my comment.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to ask if there's any opportunity to get some grant funding for this rather than taking it out of council initiatives.
So again, I would say that, yes, I'll let Amy speak to that, but council, sometimes we just have to be the ones putting the seed money in, you know, and we've been there. We did the seed money for the Trails Initiative. We did the seed money for branding. We did the seed money for hosting. And our ability to leverage that money up is something we should all be proud of. So I'll let Amy speak to it, but there are times, and this may be one of them as per staff's recommendation, where we're not grant eligible at this point, where we just have to jump in and then eventually prove it out by getting the grant money because we've got a project, we've got a shovel-ready project. Amy?
Yeah, I think council knows that I look for grants for any project before I bring something forward. And with this one in particular, unfortunately, our usual suite of Northern Development grants that we go after, none of them are a great fit for this project. With the RV park, we were lucky at the time we needed to do the planning of the RV park. There was a catalyst fund, one-time funding available through the CCCTA, and we were able to access that and leverage a bit of city dollars in order to do the planning for that project. In the past with trails, we've been able to leverage the $10,000 project planning grant from Rural Dividend. That's not available right now. So other than trying to make it fit into a bigger strategic initiatives grant application in July and then waiting until the fall to even get started if we were successful with that, there's nothing else out there right now that would be the right fit for for a grant for this project.
Go ahead, Councillor Paul, on the follow-up, and then Councillor Runge,
Yeah.
see you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm disappointed to hear that, and I think council saw loud and clear that I have some concerns about a 4.6 budget uptick, and I know Councillor Mayor Simpson that you say that this is not a budget issue. I have to differ to the extent that if we weren't spending $40,000 out of council initiatives, we would have the opportunity, therefore, to reduce the council initiatives budget by 40,000, which would correspondingly reduce the budget. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to be opposed to this one.
Councillor Runge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I've tried to hold back here for a time because I'm always one to go first and then put my foot in my mouth. This topic has actually caused me also to walk the river and check things out and see and look. And you know what? When I was down there, I was actually, you sometimes forget what we have as beauty out around there. And I did speak with a number of people on council and the mayor with regards to this, and I'm really torn. Like, I think originally what happened was that, we're dealing with all this budget stuff right on our heads. So we're thinking, how can we save money? How can we save money? But if you really think of it as a council initiative, and that we didn't use our full council initiatives last year, because originally when it came out at 70,000, that was really our max council initiatives. And I didn't want to use all our council initiatives in one foul swoop. But then seeing that we had 141 left, I actually, I have doubts with regards to the feasibility, but if it works, man, this would be a fabulous thing for the community. I'd actually even, and then, I kept researching, and what I realized also is that a lot of whitewater rafters also use standing waves many, many times. So, this, I think if you incorporate that with the surfing community, now we're starting to get some real bang for our buck from all sorts of people. So, even though, the budget, that part really scares me. I go with Councillor Vic with regards to, hey, what's the cheapest way to get to our answer? But that being said, I have to speak in favor of this now after, I did actually reconsider it. I spent a fair amount of time doing research, and to get something like this, it's not going to be a Skookumchuck Narrows because it's man-made, but I think it could be really, really cool for our town and really a destination piece. So I guess that's just so I put my 2 cents worth.
And I appreciate that, Councillor Runge. And I think the original intent is not so much a surf wave as others have. It's actually to incorporate it with that canyon. So it's of a kind where when you attract the whitewater, it's like a bike park in a mountain bike network. People go and they ride the main trails in the network, but the bike park is where they can go and play and practice their skills and so on. Whenever you put those two combinations in the same place, you get people coming like crazy, and they'll do a trail ride and then they'll go play in the park. That's how this is envisioned. Is yes, surfers may come and play, or people may just come for that feature. But if we can continue the work, which is also embedded in the report, of figuring out easy access, egress to that Quesnel Canyon, now you become a true whitewater community. And if you take a look at, Elements Adventures out of Vernon, or some of the other places that have people come in from all over to take courses, we would be in a really interesting situation to do that. But the community down in Williams Lake for whitewater has grown substantively over the last number of years. And I happened to be out at Troll after the decision was made to stand this down, and we were skinning up to go up to the top of the Silver Ski, and all the people around me who were skinning up were all bemoaning the fact that council wasn't advancing this. And as I looked around, I realized they're all the new people who have moved to our town. Straight to the city manager's point, it's kind of why they're coming here. They're buying our brand. They're buying that access to nature. So again, council's right. It's a big ticket item for a risky venture. It's probably our riskiest kind of feasibility study. Can we do this? But at the end of the day, council has proved if we can do this, if we can get the regulatory agencies to sign off, we can move into the actual shovel-ready phase. then the rest, we've got a good track record of getting paid for by others, right? So that would be my hope in this case as well. And as I've said, we've got a very good track record of proving that to be the case. Councillor Elliott, and then if nobody's got anything to add, I'll call the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a couple of points. The council initiatives, I mean, that's exactly what it's here for. So I feel okay with moving forward with it. We've got to get the seed money from somewhere for something that's as innovative as this. I respect Councillor Runge's comments on this and being able to revisit it and give it some more thought. And not only will we see, I actually didn't think much about the surfers. There's some of that going on for sure, and the boogie boards and stuff, but I think it's mainly going to be the kayakers. But the crossover we're going to see between the kayakers and the mountain biking community too. There's a lot of them that are going to be doing the same things. If that when the RV park gets in, having that there with all the trails, it's really going to be a game changer for us.
Councillor Riddenberg.
Thank you. So I would say ditto to all the positive points I've just heard here. It is a scary prospect. And for those, for some councillors who haven't been in at the beginning of a project, you have all those doubts, right? You're going, what about this? What about that? The costs. Those are all things that we all go through every time we start a new project. And I think when you look at our waterfront design plan, the whole plan is amazing. When you look at how we want to reinvigorate the bridge and be able to use it for more than just crossing back and forth. When you look at some of the other spectacular pieces that we're going to add to that waterfront, this is just another one of those pieces that, if it's viable, and that's what our consultant will tell us, whether this is going to work or not, and how we get it to work if we can, we're going to have this amazing waterfront piece. And, we always bemoan the fact that we're trying to change tourism in our community. And here is something that's unique, kind of like our bike piece that's happening, our mountain biking. It's those unique pieces. It's not just the same old come camp, go for a swim and leave, or, check out, one or two things. It's now really, you're going to have families come here and go, I think we should try this. It's just, I think, it's just quite exciting to think about what our entire waterfront is going to be like eventually. And sorry, my computer was talking to me. Cortana.
Was it yours? Okay. Councillor Goulet, did I see you have your hand up, or? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm too listening to the debate, and also did some research on what this could do for our community. It actually is pretty huge for us to do this. I know it's always about a risk, and everything you do involves a risk. I'm looking at the recommendation, and do we have to approve the $40,000, or can we revisit this and come back to looking at that $40,000 piece? Because we can reconsider the resolution, which I'm all for, but I'm just thinking, is there a way to look at that? Because the way we've got the motion now is that we're saying we're going to revisit it and plus approve the use of the 40,000. So just wondering if there's an opportunity to come back and just review that number. I heard Mitch and Martin talk about just using other or looking at other opportunities of where people have done some great work. I know we'll be a leader, but I did too also look at Alberta and found it very interesting how they did that work to come to where they are, maybe tagging off some of that. And like I said, I'm not in disagreement. I think we should reconsider it. I think it will be a good investment and a good way for us to go. Just is there a way, if we cannot do the 40,000 piece, and just move us along?
So I see Councillor Runge. So just to be clear, when staff bring forward a price for us on any of these things, they've done work to get us a price. That price is always an up to for us, unless they come back and say, we've done the project and you need to add a little bit more. So the intention is that if it can be done in a less expensive manner, it will. But I want to be clear, one of the things that was missed last meeting, and I don't want it to be missed this meeting, this is a specialty project that we do not have the capacity in-house to do, nor do we have the time to do. Amy's shop is fully engaged in a lot of other things, and especially if we're successful this month with the COVID grants, and we need to move into next stage on the bike park, on the RV park, all of that stuff. So that's why it's priced the way it is. It's probably one of the first, I think, that we've seen a kind of an all-in, this is what it's going to take to hire the expertise to get the job done. But Amy, maybe you could just speak to the status of it since our last conversation.
Sure. So yeah, we definitely researched this a bit and worked with Urban Systems to reach out, identify who are the players, types of consultants that could even do this sort of work, and reached out to a couple of them and got a bit of a scope of work from one of what it would look like and what the cost would be. So there's a little bit of budget in there for working with Urban Systems on just managing it and all of the different components that we'll need to know to work with the consultant, that consultant cost for doing the work of the feasibility study, and then someone locally to go to the different stakeholder groups and the different, the DFO, the different ministries that we'll have to work with to kind of present it to them once we have something to present to say, okay, what do you need to know from us? What would the next steps be to get to yes? So all of that is included in there, and it's definitely an up to $40,000.
Okay. Councillor Runge?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And let me be clear. Yes, I was worried about the money, but I am not, consultants reports I always feel they're expensive, but that's the way it is. I'm behind this 100%. The budget, I agree that the budget, we know it's an up to, but for me, the 40,000 is just what we're going to do. I definitely reconsidered it last week or 2 weeks ago. I would have said no way to this. I have, I've checked things out. I look at it, and I think this is an exciting opportunity, and I have to agree with all the yays to this, because we have to get out of our, I think we have to come up to the plate on this one, because it's just not there in any other funding. And if it would be great, if we could take some out of COVID, excellent. But if we can't, let's do, this is, to Councillor Elliott's point, this is what council initiatives is all about. So let's do it. I mean, that's, and so I just wanted to clarify that point. Sorry, Tony, that actually I'm in.
Okay. And final comment to Councillor Paul, because I think we're sort of going around and round on this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make it clear that I agree with all of you about the excitement and the viability. I think this is a great project. I would be voting in favor of this motion if it was within a budget that didn't exceed 3%. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. So on the motion, which does have the pricing embedded and the advancing this and all of the comments associated with that, anyone opposed? Okay. That motion is passed. Thank you. And
may I have that recorded, please?
Yep.
Thank
okay.
you.
And thanks everybody for your due diligence around this issue. And as Councillor Rudenberg indicated, part of what I realized last time, I think for the new councillors, it is that first sort of sucking up and, okay, this is a greenfield project. It's a start of something. And hopefully we all get to enjoy the outcome of it at a later date. Thanks again. Okay, moving on to city staff. North Cariboo Joint Advisory Committee. Councillor Rudenberg, just to give a verbal update.
Thank you. So we did have a meeting last week, and the majority of that meeting, I would say, was in regards to the upcoming rec center referendum. And embedded within the report, there was a motion to have two spokespersons to represent both the city and the CRD in the report. As local government, as you know, we play with different sets of rules compared to the regional district. We follow the community charter, and what we need to do is address the spokesperson's appointment. As the community charter stipulates, the mayor is our spokesperson when it comes to such things. And he is the spokesperson unless he chooses otherwise. So I'll just leave it at that. And I believe city manager has something to speak to.
Yeah, I've asked the city manager just to speak to this for council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the community charter actually says the responsibilities of the mayor is to communicate information to the council, but then also to reflect the will of council and carry out other duties on behalf of council, which would suggest that this could certainly be a responsibility for the mayor. But this is also addressed under our own city communication policies, where it talks about the mayor being the primary spokespersons for media relations shall be the city manager or the mayor or their delegates. And that is same topic is covered under both COM 1 and COM 2 policy. So I think we got it covered under both our communications policies and the community charter. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the reason that we're bringing it forward at this point, I'm going to make a suggestion to council how we proceed. Is it really embedded in the report? There should not have been a recommendation from staff that a committee make a determination on the city council lead spokesperson. That's where the error occurred. You know, that I don't agree from past practice on having two spokespeople. We've already got some issues in social media already where people, you know, are beginning to weigh in. I think it would have been much cleaner to allow staff to run a referendum. So what I would like us to do is let's wait and see what the joint statement is crafted as. I think we all need to work and make sure that that joint statement is as clean and clear as possible. And then I do think we need to hold our 4 northern directors accountable, because I would like all of us signing that joint statement where we agree on why we're doing this, we agree on the timing for this, and we agree that this needs to proceed and support the referendum. Because believe me, those of you who don't have history in this, you may not want history lessons, but in this case, they are pretty telling history lessons where we have had people go sideways, speak against referendums that they agreed to and have referendums defeated. And we still have some issues around the airport referendum and how it's being characterized to the public with respect to what that money is supposed to be used for. So I think council members, particularly new council members, when you hear a dialogue going on with some warning signs and you know, a little alarm bells going on, you may want to defer to those of us who've been down this path. So with respect to this matter, it looks like we've decided that there's going to be a spokesperson for the city and a spokesperson for the CRD. I think we all really now need to push that the statement, the joint statement, is as tight as possible. And then I'm comfortable, we'll deal with the city spokesperson, but I'm comfortable that council members then have speaking points, because I agree with those who said we should all be able to defend why we're doing this at this time. But that mandate letter needs to be tight, and that's what we need to take as our speaking points. So we'll address this further at the next joint planning meeting when we get the mandate letter, but I do ask council to make sure you weigh in and make sure that we all support a very strong joint statement, okay? Any questions or comments on this item? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mainly just a ditto. That's exactly why I was opposed to it in the original meeting. Been down this road before. I don't want the waters to get muddied at all. I just want a clear, concise communication piece. And if the only way we can do it is to get exactly what the mayor said, the statement just nailed right down, then that's the way we'll go. But even on this topic, there's been dissension from the other side, from the directors a few times. So it's a huge thing for our community, and I just want it to go as well as possible. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, seeing nothing, we'll move on to city staff reports then. The Quesnel Youth Soccer Association, Director Norburn.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to obtain council approval to enter into a 5-year license of occupation and management agreement with the Quesnel Youth Soccer Association. So the Quesnel Youth Soccer Association have managed the soccer complex since 2003, the outdoor fields, in 2006. Those are the when the indoor sport field facility was constructed, initially under agreements with the city of Quesnel. Since 2016, the management and operation of the soccer complex has been part of the North Cariboo Recreation and Park Service. A new license of occupation between the Cariboo Regional District and the city and Quesnel Youth Soccer Association was brought forward to the Joint Advisory Committee in November. The agreement is substantively similar to the previous agreement, with the only notable changes being the removal of references to a potential construction of a gymnastics facility on the property and the implementation of the recreation, or sometimes called resident pass, program during the life of the agreement, since it was implemented in 2017. Under the terms of the agreement, Quesnel Youth Soccer is paid an annual fee for service to manage and maintain the property, and they collect and retain all revenues for facility use and rentals. The committee recommended that the agreement be approved by City Council and the CRD Board of Directors. Council approval is required for the city to enter into and sign the agreement. So the recommendation is that Council enter into the attached 5-year license of occupation and management agreement between the City of Quesnel, Cariboo Regional District, and Quesnel Youth Soccer Association regarding the soccer complex located at 980 Anderson Drive in Quesnel, and that the mayor and corporate administrator be authorized to execute such documentation as required.
Okay, on the motion, Councillor Runge. Second, Councillor Paul. Any questions or comments? Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, Director Norburn. Next, Director Thomas on the Johnston Avenue speed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's direction regarding numerous complaints or requests from a resident who resides on Johnston Avenue. Persistent speed complaints have been received by Public Works by this resident beginning in 2019. These complaints range from speeding concerns, replacing the speed bumps on Johnston Avenue, creating 3- and 4-way stops at intersections along Johnston Avenue, and adding a sidewalk on the south side of the street. It's important to note that the RCMP have been involved in these complaints as well, and increased patrols, the connection for increased patrols were made. Speed readers were also installed on Johnston Avenue and do not show that there is sort of habitual speeding problem in this area. A request for the installation of speed bumps is not recommended by staff, as Johnston Avenue has speed bumps installed and then removed at the request of the residents in 2014. An additional sidewalk on the south side of Johnston Avenue has also been requested, which also does not appear to be warranted based on the number of pedestrians using this existing sidewalk. The recommendation is that Council confirms Johnston Avenue is an arterial road designed to move traffic to and from Johnston subdivision, and supports staff on not changing the speed limits on Johnston Avenue, not reinstalling the traffic control devices or speed humps as they were already removed, and not adding 3- or 4-way stop signs at the intersections along Johnston Avenue. And that Council supports staff decision that the volume of pedestrian traffic on Johnston Avenue does not warrant adding sidewalks to the south side of Johnston Avenue.
Council. Councillor Elliott, are you making the recommendation? Are you making, okay, seconder for the motion? Councillor Rudenberg, and Councillor Paul, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to clarify that I received a telephone call today from the chair of the Johnston Neighborhood Association. And if we look at, I'm going to put my glasses on here, at page 2 of the report at the very top, where it says that a resident wanted speed bumps reinstalled on Johnston Avenue, which were removed in 2014 after a request was made from the Johnston Neighborhood Association. Mr. Campbell has clarified that that request did not come from the Neighborhood Association. Rather, it came from a group of residents, as near as he could tell, that were near the speed bumps, so not from the Johnston Neighborhood Association.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this? Councillor Elliott? Yeah, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm just going to ramble on quietly. As far as the sidewalks go, I mean, I've been down there a lot. I don't live there, but they've got the sidewalk, I think, in a perfect position, closest to the school. So the kids, whenever you see the kids are walking up and down the sidewalk, to have another one there would be extremely expensive. And I personally don't feel there is a need. As far as the speed bumps, I'm going with staff on the recommendation. I understand the concerns of some people, but not all. And I've been down this road before. We voted on listening to the people that wanted it removed last time. So, you know, just to put it back in again, to potentially have it removed again. No, I'm in favor of staff recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of comments. I'll be voting in favor of the recommendation, but it would be interesting to find out what it would cost to have permanent electronic speed warning traffic devices. I feel, I live in the neighborhood, and I feel that they are indeed the most effective. And one thing that I think that could be bumped up would be RCMP enforcement. I think that if there was a police car hiding behind a billboard somewhere along Johnston Avenue, that would have a positive effect as well.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in regards to a couple of questions that have come up, there has been an enhanced level of policing in this area. That's confirmed by Staff Sergeant Darren Dodge. And in fact, a few times when we received complaints, I sent him the updated complaint and he says, okay, we will go down there, do more presence again. So they are trying to be more of a visible presence through this area. Just for council's edification, when that previous speed bump was removed, there was 26 residents who lived in close proximity who signed a petition for its removal. It was 26, so it may not have been the neighborhood association, but a fairly substantial number of residents. I think that is it. Thank you.
Okay. And again, to Councillor Paul's point about permanent LED speed reducers, I guess my question would be, where do we stop with that? You know, we've got a standing request basically on Hydraulic Road about the speed on Hydraulic Road, Lewis Drive, Anderson Drive, you know, it goes on and on. And, you know, in my estimation, because we've looked at some of these in the past, you know, one or two speeders that really gun it running down a street can become, for some people, a real speed problem. And we saw that on Lewis, when the average speed on Lewis was actually below the posted speed. But again, you get the odd one that goes flying by there and, you know, people feel like it's everybody. We've been there with Racing Road as well at one point. There was quite a debate on Racing Road about speed bumps, no speed bumps. Up on Enemark, there's been another one, etc. So, you know, I think people speed, and you can't have an RCMP behind, since we don't have billboards. I don't know what you would hide them behind on every road that's in question. I think, you know, we do our best to police the speed limits, and in this case, our staff are being questioned, you know, quite a lot by the resident, and that's why we've decided to bring it to council to give support to staff. That this is council's position, not just staff's position. So any further comments on the motion? Okay, anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, thank you very much. And City Manager, just for process, will you be communicating council's decision to the resident in question so that they are made aware that this is now council's position affirming staff's recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, they will. That resident will be communicated with.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just on that, I mean, it was a unanimous decision, so.
Yeah. Okay. So next, the North Cariboo Seniors Council.
The purpose of this report is to seek council's approval of the attached memorandum of understanding with the North Cariboo Seniors Council. So of course, council approved up to 100,000 of the COVID Safe Restart grant to be provided to the North Cariboo Seniors Council for administration, logistics, and projects, provided an MOU was agreed to. So the MOU is attached, as well as a first-year budget for the group and a list of the activities that they have been up to. So the recommendation is that council approve the attached memorandum of understanding with the North Cariboo Seniors Council and authorize the mayor and corporate officer to sign it on behalf of the city.
Councillor Runge, so moved. Councillor Goulet, second. Questions or comments? Okay, thank you. And again, this is a pre-decision by council. This is just formalizing what the agreement would be. So on the motion, anyone opposed? That motion has carried. Thank you, Director Bolton. Okay, next, now Kyle, you can show us your face. There we go. So climate action plan, engagement plan results. Go ahead, Mr. Aben.
Thank you, Mayor Simpson. This is my last report to council, so I just wanted to quickly thank everyone for the support. I've really enjoyed working with staff. There's a very bunch of kind and capable people at the city, so thank you very much. The purpose of this report is to review the results of the Quesnel Climate Action Plan engagement with the stakeholders and the community towards implementation for 2021. Since both my reports are for information purposes only, I'll try and be very succinct. Engagement was a bit difficult, not just for myself, but I know that it was a challenge for many people at the city doing different things. Our engagement did get bumped till the end of the year. In our first 2 weeks, we had 113 responses to the survey, and the next 6, we only had 30. So timing does play a lot. And then the other thing I'd like to mention is that, you know, when you do have a survey, there is always a bit of bias with those people who will answer a survey and those who won't. So those one-on-one discussions that I had, I think are very valuable as well. So I think as a council, you can either decide to move forward and understand that engagement was difficult, or you can really take some time to step back and re-engage people. But there's a few quick items that I wanted to point out that really stood out in the engagement with me. Number one, I think the builders in our area are very keen to step code, honestly. I think they're building at a higher level of efficiency than we know. All I'll say is that Joe Hart, he's the president of the BC Builders Association, and he's willing to speak with council about that. He builds net zero homes right there in Quesnel. So if there's anyone to speak with, it's definitely him. The other thing is that I think there's a clear understanding between energy use and climate impacts. And I think that's good going forward, because that does put personal impact of energy use back on individuals. Something that stood out as not really a positive from my perspective is that only 18% of residents knew about the climate targets, the emission reduction targets. And from my perspective, it's tough because I really wish that I've done a better job at communicating those. And from a political standpoint, it makes them easier to miss, in all honesty, from a council perspective, if not that many people know about them to start with. The question that was asked, if you're willing to pay more taxes to address climate action, only 46% said no. I think that speaks volumes when 54% said yes, or to some extent. I'm not suggesting we have tax increases for this, but it does speak to people's willingness to take action. And then the rest of the details I have included in the report. I've spoke to the Rotary. I thank you very much, Councillor Paul and Councillor Rudenberg, for the support. It was like having family in the audience. And then Baker Creek Enhancement Society tried to spread the word. And I did the best I could, but I did miss one huge area, is First Nations engagement. I think when we first originally spoke about engagement, there was going to be a dedicated path towards that. I don't know if I ever missed that path or whether it was just something, a failing of my own. But again, I'll leave it there for some questions, and then I'll move on to the next report.
Questions or comments by council? Councillor Paul.
Thank you for your report, and thank you for your good work. There's a lot of meat to chew on in here. I do have a couple of questions. Quesnel is obviously a signatory to the BC Climate Action Charter, but I'd like to know what percentage of BC local governments, and I'm talking mainly municipalities, but I imagine some regional districts have signed on. Do you have an idea as to what the percentage would be of communities that have signed on to the charter?
You know, I can't give you a specific stat, but I do know at one point they bragged that it was almost universal membership. But I can't speak to that in 2021, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I've gone through your all of your graphs and so on, and I think what it comes down to is just that, and this isn't particularly unique to climate action change and so on, but communication is the key here. And it's frustrating because, I mean, we have a very robust communications department, and it just seems like that the population seems to be, for the most part, uninformed, and I don't know what the answer to that is. And I do have some further questions in the second part of your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Paul, it's a frustration with a lot of us. I know that a lot of climate change paper articles were removed from the Globe and Mail and others because they're considered depressing. It is something where it's a tough topic to speak to some group of people. I had some people phone me at the city who were quite upset that we were even talking about this. So you're right, it is frustrating. We have a fantastic communications department. I think they did all they could, but I think a little bit with this was the timing around Christmas. So perhaps, you know, there would be another time to run the survey in the future if there is a delay in implementation. But I share your frustration, sir.
I have Councillor Runge and then Councillor Rudenberg.
Sorry, I tried to adjust with my mouse. Kyle, thanks for the report. And I've got a quick question. Did you, or are you able to share with us the, is there a certain demographic that has been answering the questions? Like, did we get any demographic data on the respondents?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Runge. I did not get any of that demographic data coming back from communications, and I do not think that we did. I think you have to set that up in advance, and I think we just wanted to have an open communication. But I can do some further checking and see if communications does have that in the background of their survey results.
Oh, no, that's fine. I was just curiosity, just because we had a low response rate, and if they were all a certain age demographic, that would, you know, change or renters or citizen taxpayers, all those things. It's just questions, but not a problem. Otherwise, thank you very much for the report.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. To answer Councillor Paul's question, quick check. 187 out of 190 municipalities, regional district, and the Island Trust have signed on to the climate action agreement. And just another piece for Kyle's interest, UBCM will actually be bringing forward their draft recommendations on their climate action recommendations out of a committee that was formed last year. So that'll be coming forward through the board this week and then released to the public very soon. So it's just it'll be another tool for local government to use in regards to climate action recommendations.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments from me again to Councillor Paul's point, and thanks for the quick grab of the numbers there, Councillor Rudenberg. The current government, and there's continuity in the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, is actually one of the mandates is to look at the charter, because in the original charter, it never really came with a lot of resources and a lot of assistance in municipalities other than the rebate. Which I think was only nominal. So, you know, I would be hopeful that this current government, which I understand may be establishing some pretty aggressive standards and targets in the upcoming legislative period, will also understand that municipalities need to be equipped and resourced to be able to drive this agenda beyond just our property taxation. The other piece on strategic communications, we did have a meeting, you know, at council is aware, we're looking at that whole issue of strategic communications so that we can have an iterative conversation with the public. We can inform the dialogue, we can do snapshot surveys, we can do just-in-time engagement. So I'm excited as of our meeting today, that we'll be bringing something back to council to look at this whole issue of how do we engage on an ongoing basis in an informed dialogue with our constituents. And this is one of our strategic initiatives that would be a target for that as well. I think it's going to be heightened if the province does do what I'm hearing they may be doing and setting really stringent targets on a short time frame. I think this whole issue will be heightened. And Kyle, I would add to those who have thanked you for your work, you've positioned as well to be able to jump in with both feet. I do have to note though, that in the comments, item number 27, in the commentary, I'm not sure if this was a plant or you slipped 10 bucks or whatever, but that comment, we need to extend the contract for someone like Kyle, awareness needs to be raised. So you're in the report there, my friend. And so.
Well, that just shows my honesty, because I really would have liked to remove that one, but yeah, I've given it verbatim.
Yeah, I just had to raise all of our awareness on that if it was missed. So I think we can pick this up. I think it's a good platform for us, albeit the numbers, I mean, the numbers are actually fairly reasonable given how small it could have been. But it's certainly a bit of a foundation for us to work forward from. So any further comments or questions on this? As Kyle indicated, these are for council information only. And we will be pursuing climate change even while Kyle goes on to other adventures. Councillor Paul?
Yeah. Are we done with this item, or are we going on to the?
We're going to go on to the next item.
Okay, well, I do have a question out of the second part of Kyle's report. And that is on page 6 of 6, item number 2, thermal camera home image.
No, so you've moved on. We've got to close this agenda item off and then we'll move. It's 2 separate agenda items, right?
Okay, thanks. I thought that.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that we hadn't got there yet.
Yeah, no. So anybody on the first, so it's item number 4, the engagement plan results. Any further comments on that? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for that, Kyle. And then we'll move on to the next one, which is the program milestone number 5. So go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The program milestone number 5 for the Municipalities for Climate Innovation program, it's really intended to be the final step of the program. I don't think any of the staff across the country really got to a point where we can track our implementation to see whether they're successful or not. But the way I've presented this to you is just to really review some of the things that we've done really well at the city, and then submit the climate action plan in a more succinct format. So I'm not going to review all of those. But I did want to just speak to a couple of things that the city is doing really well that was doing before I even got there. The LED lighting replacement policy, that's just one of those things that from a climate perspective, it's great, but from a budget perspective, it's even better. Same with using trenchless technology. Chris has been doing this for years. Really fantastic to see. The fact that telematics may have some crossover for Matt and some benefits as well. And then your support for district energy. I think it shows that you are looking to the future and you are willing to take some steps and some risk. And as the mayor has said in the previous comment, feasibility studies sometimes say no, but I'm really hopeful that this is a positive one. So my only last thing I wanted to leave you with is that really to get to the shovel-ready projects, we will need some financial assistance from the province, as the mayor was pointing out. But I also think that that CAREP funding, it really does have to stay in a climate hands. And I know last year it went to general revenue after I petitioned to get it out. But I think that the staff person or the staff within the city who will be working on this will need some of that small funding. And I would encourage you to, in future years, to keep that towards carbon and climate change for sure. But I will leave it open for questions. I know Councillor Paul has some at this point.
Go ahead, Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you, Kyle. Looking at number 1 under climate actions underway at the city of Quesnel, I'm on page 3 of the report, or 78 of 186 of the agenda. LED lighting replacement. Do we have any idea? I'm sure we do. What percentage of city streetlights are already converted over to LED?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Paul. I wouldn't have that percentage, but Chris will. Chris has very detailed of ones that have been changed and that have not. And in fact, BC Hydro bills us differently for an LED light compared to an old incandescent or high pressure sodium. So there is a record of that percentage, but I cannot share that with you tonight. I apologize.
Well, I look forward to the extension of LED lights down to my end of the street because it's certainly a lot brighter down at the other end of the street. On the matter of telematics, we're estimating $50,000 plus an annual fee of $15,000. Is that $50,000? Is that a one-time expenditure, or is that would we expect $50,000 a year?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Paul. Under my initial take with the meeting that the people had for the city manager, Matt, myself, and others, the 50,000 would be what it would take to put the equipment into the trucks. And then the 15,000 would be the annual fee to take the measurements, give us the feedback, provide the monitoring data. But as I understand it, that 50,000 would be one-time fee.
Okay, thank you. And on electric vehicles, it's certainly interesting to see the cost of electric vehicles coming down over time. I'm sort of looking at the idea of maybe having an electric truck. I don't know if it'll be this time or next time, but certainly I'm looking in that direction. On electric small equipment, you're saying that the cost recoup would be somewhere in the area of 3 years. I would suggest that if you look in my shop, most small equipment doesn't last 3 years. That's just a comment. With regard to thermal camera home image program, and there's a suggestion in there that we, the city, buy a thermal camera. Is this not something that Fortis could do as part of their program?
Yeah, very good comment, Councillor Paul. I have heard that Fortis is looking into more of a residential component. Fortis up till now has really focused their energy audits and their reduction efforts on the commercial. But I do not know that this specific program is something they have spoken about. I do know that the city of Kamloops has launched the program, but I have not heard that Fortis is going to take this on yet.
And finally, I'd just like your opinion on electric car charging and the fact that these electric car charging stations are popping up all over the place, sometimes way out in the middle of nowhere. And much of these car charging stations are at no cost to the person using it. And I'm not seeing that electric vehicles are paying a road tax because, I mean, road taxes are generally generated through the sale of fuel, gasoline and diesel. And so I'd just like to hear what is the feeling out there in I guess in that community as to where we're going with trying to capture road taxes from electric vehicles, because electric vehicles is certainly the way of the future. In fact, it's accelerating at a rate that wasn't expected.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor Paul. The difficulty with collecting a road tax is that 85 to 90% of people who charge their electric vehicles are charging them at home with their own power. So you are seeing a lot of these other individual ones along the highway. And in my perspective, those will not be free for the foreseeable future. I think it's one of those initial plans to help get electric vehicles out there. But when they are charged, and in other jurisdictions in the United States, they do include that component that would equal to the road tax. But unfortunately, it is one of those harder things to capture because the vast majority of people are getting the electricity from their home chargers. And unless you have an interface showing to the government what you're charging specifically out of that, it just shows up on your general bill. So there are some discussions about perhaps including that a higher insurance rate for electric cars or a small component that covers that road tax up front on an annual basis that we're missing elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Runge.
Thanks for the report, Kyle. I'm actually really excited. I hope sometime, you know, I look at the telematics as something that our city can actually get into, and actually I think we have bigger savings because we'll actually see vehicles that aren't, you know, that are maybe being underutilized or maybe can be used slightly differently to actually enhance even, you know, cost savings that I think are much broader than are there. Councillor Paul, with regards to the small electric small equipment, I just happened to be at, I think, Active Rental when Greenworks was there with their with your industrial electric mower and their industrial equipment. It's something else, and it's not something that lasts like our little drills. These things are meant to last, and I think what you're going to find is, like with a lot of the electric vehicles, that the manufacturers will most likely come up with a way to either lease the battery, because that's the fear for a lot of people, and so that the batteries maintain strong, keep a good strong charge. With regard, you know my feeling with regards to electric vehicles. I think they're, you know, I have a hybrid already, but it's and I do look at the electric ones. I'm thinking we're still at the cusp of it. I think I would love to actually see our city actually go into smaller electric vehicles with regards to some of our you know, smaller fleet things, but that's going to be in the future. So, you know, it's a great report. I don't think we're going to have a choice here. I think we're going to be moving into this, and it's really good to see that we're already, you know, looking at all these things. Thanks, Scott. Thanks a lot. And thanks for all your hard work.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if I can just make a comment, because my shop as well, I bought a little electric Black & Decker weed eater 11 years ago. I never bring the battery in, and it still runs like it does the first day. And I put my money where my mouth is. I did get one of those Greenworks lawnmowers, and I tell you, they're unbelievable. Quiet. My neighbors love me. I can do both yards and twice in one charge, but I'll quit there.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, if we're talking about equipment, I've got no, never mind. Just kidding. My neighbors think I'm strange because I have one of those Greenworks mowers, and they're all big, noisy things, right? So anyway, so Kyle, I think on behalf of council, I'd like to thank you for the good work that you've done for us. I think that the report, the engagement report, but this particular report gives us the base level of activities. We know where we need to go. We know the kinds of things that we need to do, and on a priority basis, we can start chewing through that. And so I think council is committed to this. You've given us the material that we need. As I said, I'm hoping this legislative session, the province comes forward with a strong commitment, strong time frame, and the resources we need. And if that's the case, you know, we keep talking about, are we shovel ready? We're absolutely shovel ready here because of the good work you've done for us. So thank you very much for that. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Mayor Simpson.
Okay. And stay in touch. Okay, now moving on to the other side of our business. So I don't have Director Turner on my screen, but there is a blank there. Is that you, Tanya?
She's here.
Back? So I have a blank. I was thinking it was Director Turner. I've got a blank on my screen with no name on it. So
Lindsay Blair.
Oh, Lindsay. Okay, super. Thank you. Okay, so Director Turner, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So the first report in this series is regarding the Andre's large-scale retail building, the last of his developments on his commercial properties in the south. I'm just going to go right into the background. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 696 meter squared retail building. The proposed building is intended to be leased at this point by one tenant. However, it should be noted that the building is designed and can be divided into 4 units. This building is the last phase of the development on this commercial complex, where there's already a number of retail businesses as listed in your reports. The building is to be similar in appearance to the other existing buildings in the commercial complex, which includes this color palettes and facade materials. The majority of the site has been paved, but the rest of the site will be paved and landscaped following the development of this building. The The desire to complete this building at this time is outlined in the applicant's justification letter, and he is clear that completion of this building at this time will help him clean up the site and clean up this area, and as well with his discussions with different businesses coming into the community, he is stating that it will be easier to fill this building once constructed. The development permit is required to assess the proposed development with respect to the form and character. And so that's where I'm going to go. I just want to stop here, and I'm not going to go into the details because of the long agenda tonight, and you've already read the report and you don't want to hear me blabbering on. But if there's anything with respect to the different sections in the report, by all means, maybe this is where you can go and ask me directly, or we can move right into the recommendation at council's desire.
Yeah, let's just do, are there any kind of questions? Because it's got a bunch of subject twos in here. So does anybody have any questions in advance of us advancing the recommendation? Okay, I'm not seeing any. The one question I do have is about that landscaping piece. And so, you know, it's kind of by way of a promissory note, but I do think, you know, the developer needs to be crystal clear that landscaping needs to be maintained. It needs to be upgraded and needs to be maintained, and that we will, as a council, if necessary, do the imposition on taxes if we have to do it ourselves. Because I think it's one thing to come in, you know, and make all the promises on the front end and, you know, talk to council about, you know, all of these investments, and it is great for our community, but not if those businesses get disadvantaged by, you know, inappropriate maintenance of the site. So I was glad to see that in the report, and I do think it ought to be emphasized as we advance this with the proponent. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so we'll go to the recommendation then.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is
Sorry,
that
Councillor Paul now. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Paul.
Sorry, I heard you say recommendation and I'm simply moving it.
Okay, well, I'll note you as the mover. Director Turner will just read it onto the record there.
Thank you. The recommendation is that council approve DP 2020-32 for the construction of a 696.7 meters squared, one-story retail building on Lot 1, District Lot 6679, Cariboo District Plan 34759, as proposed on the attached plans, subject to the applicant submitting civil engineering plans are deemed acceptable by the chief building official, director of capital works, and the Cariboo Regional District, submission of an exterior lighting plan, the submission of a $3,750 landscaping bond, which is 125% of the estimated cost of landscaping, paving of the proposed as described of the property as described in the site plan within 2 years of development permit approval, one-way and no entry signage being installed at appropriate accesses of the one-way aisle, and the existing landscaping being maintained and brought back up to standard as approved in past permits.
Okay, and Councillor Paul so moved. Seconded, Councillor Rudenberg. Any further questions or comments? Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, Director Turner. Okay, then moving on, and I believe Councillor Goulet will be recusing himself for this next one because it pertains to where he is the executive director.
So do I just leave the meeting now? Is that how
leave the meeting, and you will be texted when you can come back in again, and then just click the link and come back in.
Okay, I will do that now.
Sorry,
Mayor?
Ms. Albers?
I'll be the one texting Councillor Goulet to let him know it's time to come back in.
Okay, super. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Director Turner.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is the zoning amendment for the Quesnel Tillicum Society Friendship Center property. And I'm just going to go right into the background as well, because I believe it gives you the best description of the overall report. The Quesnel Tillicum Society has applied to rezone their property, which consists of 11 legal lots within the Quesnel Tillicum Society Native Friendship Center building. Includes a daycare and a catering service also located on the lot. Between the existing Friendship Center and the daycare center building, there is currently a vacant portion of land that's used for parking. The Quesnel Tillicum Society is intending on constructing a new 5-story, 34-unit apartment building where this parking area is located. The units are to be geared towards low-income individuals. A zoning amendment is required to permit the apartment use on the property, which is currently zoned C2A and P1 on portions of the lots. Due to the proposed density, variety of uses on the property, and the need to share parking between the uses, it was recommended that the property be rezoned to a CD zone, which would give the developer a degree of flexibility when it came to the site design. The zoning amendment application is the first step in the review approval process. A development permit, a building permit, and a servicing agreement will also be required through this development process. The Quesnel Tillicum Society will need to consolidate all subject lots prior to the building permit stage. I just want to point to you that there is a justification letter in the development package. It's a comprehensive justification letter, the best I've ever seen in my 13 years. It's 21 pages. It was done by a professional, and I was a little bit teary-eyed when I saw it because it was so well done. So it's a really good read for you to do. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of all of our analysis, but our details of our analysis are put in here for record purposes, as well as for council to understand the details and develop any questions you might have on the particulars of our analysis. So I'm going to leave that to you before I go into the full discussion and ask if there's any further discussion. This one I want to note is complex. We don't have any comprehensive development zones in the community. We had an area that was set aside for comprehensive development zones a time back. It never manufactured. We don't, in my history or knowledge, have ever had a comprehensive development zone in the city. Comprehensive development zones are for this purpose, are for complex sites that require a lot of intricate, detailed, and sort of site-specific zoning, a bit different than a spot zoning on the exact zone itself. So that's why we're recommending this. There is a slight amendment to the overall CD area that is a sort of a page holder in our zoning bylaw that allows us to do comprehensive development zones in that the current comprehensive development zone was set up, as some of you will remember, for a golf course recreation area on the south side of town. And as such, it was developed in that way. In the amendments, you'll see that we're recommending that the new comprehensive development source, the section of the zoning bylaw that guides this, allows us to define what uses will go in that. And that's really to allow us to have a real good ability to work with developers on a site-by-site basis. We've talked about a few areas coming up, and like when we talk about the neighborhood plan for the Cariboo field, we're going to want some flexibility in developing comprehensive development zones in the future. So that's why we're going towards that end. As well, this is going to be, this again, wouldn't even, our M4 zone would not work here because we're looking at a 5-story building in this case. We're not looking at a 4-story building. So other than the downtown area, commercial area, this would be the highest apartment in town, zoned.
Okay.
So that's some of the details behind. Is there any further questions before we move on?
So one question, and it's a generic question before we move into the recommendation, but that whole area, I'm looking at the best map to look at is on page 118 of 186, and it's page 9 of the report you were referencing there. But it gives you a sense of the zoning, English Avenue and Elliott Street, North Fraser Drive, and so on, and where this area fits in. That bench is now becoming quite interesting. If you take a look at what's going to be happening up above it with the new development, you take a look at the bridges housing, you take a look at some of the properties that we're working with to get cleaned up in there, and then something as interesting as this going in where the Friendship Center is. I know we're targeting a neighborhood plan for a vacant field. What are opportunities to look at this bench through that lens? Because we're really getting a disconnect. There's some very, very aged out problematic properties there. And there's some, if this gets built, There's some brand new properties going in there, and the potential for that land to grow into a new livable space right on a riverfront trail, right on the river and so on is so huge. So what tools do we have as a council to engage in some thinking about that bench as an interesting little neighborhood, and what tools might we have to kind of move it along the lines of modernizing and upgrading that bench?
Thanks, Brian. I do think, and we have in the past discussed that that area really ought to be looked through a neighborhood plan. For the revitalization is a key reason to look at a neighborhood plan for an area. And this is definitely a key neighborhood for a revitalization plan.
Okay, so maybe if we get the one for Cariboo Field under our belt and really understand that whole process with something that's not as complicated as this, I would think council may want to then, you know, take a look at this bench as potentially the next step in that kind of approach to community development. So anyway, I didn't see any councillors with hands up, so we can, oh, Councillor Paul, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And this one's for Tanya. I noticed that the proposed development is within a floodplain area, but I read the material and it appears that raising the grade is not necessary. But when we looked at the bridges project, they did raise the grade a little bit. So could you comment on why we're not raising the grade for this one when we did for bridges?
Absolutely, Councillor Paul, and that's an excellent question. I hope we have more of those, especially around floodplains. This is not being raised because, as you'll notice in the plans, and sorry if I didn't highlight that because I really should have. Good point, Councillor Paul. There is no livable spaces on the ground floor. It is all parking. So they've actually raised the building level and the living level. All and through the building permit process, all of the mechanics, etc., will have to be above the floodplain.
Thank you. Yes, I did notice that there was no living accommodation on the ground floor, but I was under the impression that maybe there was some mechanical in there, but there's not. It's strictly parking.
We've had a number of discussions to make sure that's correct, and we've advised them very clearly that it cannot. There was a bit of question about the elevator, but all of that's been designed now to make sure that the elevator can exist where it is exactly as well.
Okay, so go ahead to the recommendation then. It's a pretty funky, interesting looking building too.
Yeah, and I should state we're not moving. Often we're moving into readings of the bylaw, but we're not tonight because I want to give this a chance to go back to the Tillicum Society and their consultants to look at how we've drafted. We really worked with them to help them draft the comprehensive development zone. So we want that to go back and so they can just have a look at it as well. And it's nice to have council review it once before you have to actually do readings. So the recommendation is that council directs staff to draft a zoning bylaw amendment creating a new comprehensive development zone over lots 4 and lots 6 to 15 of block 14, district lot 386, Cariboo District Plan 772 to allow a multi-unit residential development along with the existing Friendship Center building, daycare and catering business.
I've got Councillor Elliott, so moved. Second, Councillor Vic. Any questions or comments? Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know it's just the beginning of this, but it seems very exciting. Glad to see an elevator in there. Sometimes it just isn't able to happen as we've seen before. As chair of the Housing Committee, I know that Tanya can get passionate about housing and her job, but I never knew that her passion level rose as high as being brought to tears over a justification letter. So I hope this does move forward. And thanks for your work on this.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ditto what Councillor Elliott said. This is tremendous. The only thing I'm going to add, the proponent has mentioned with the need for housing. I suspect that the 2020 data will further exacerbate the situation with rental rates and vacancy rates. So it just speaks to the continued need for more improved housing options in our community. So I think this is a tremendous step for us.
Great. Thank you. So on the recommendation, anyone opposed? Okay, that motion is passed. Could you please give Councillor Goulet thumbs up, waving? Yay. You're back. You need to get, if we're going to do this, everybody has to practice the Arnie line, right? I'm back. I'll be back. Okay. Director Turner.
Okay, so moving on with multi-unit developments. This is for consideration of an application to amend the zoning of vacant lots 24 to 36, district lot. I'm not going to go into that in the legal description to allow multi-unit residential development. A corresponding OCP amendment to high-density residential is also required, which will be reflected in the rest of the report. On January 19th, Council was provided a report outlining the intention of the NASCO Indian Band to make application to amend the zoning of lands on Hoy Street to allow for the NASCO First Nation River Rock development. This proposal includes two fourplex units as well as a single duplex unit for a total of 10 units on the subject site. The site did go through some amendments, so not in terms of what the number of units that the applicant was looking for, but this is where we've landed. The overall development includes converting the current River Rock pub as well on the abutting property into office space, dining, and a kitchen facility, which will include servicing the residents of the abutting residential complex. The site design layout allows additional residential development in the future, and that's key. We really focused with the applicant to make sure that was possible. An official community plan and zoning amendment to allow high-density multi-unit residential uses on the subject parcel is recommended for this development as such. The proposal will allow the NASCO First Nation to establish safe and secure housing options for elders and youth in need of housing. The NASCO First Nation proposes to manage the kitchen, dining facility, and rental units. Buildings and the land will be owned and operated by the NASCO First Nation. Support letters from the NASCO First Nation Northern Health were provided and reviewed to by council in January. However, the NASCO First Nation has provided additional information, and it's actually really good rationale justification letter as well on the development. They've improved their rationale letter as well and put some more information in there for council on that. So again, I'm going to allow council to let me ask any questions they have on the details of the report.
Questions or comments before we go to the recommendation? Councillor Rudenberg.
Both of these proposals I think are really amazing. When I look at what the thought processes that have gone into it and the pieces that they're including. So when you talk about, job creation for this one, they're looking at, the property management piece, they're looking at the kitchen piece, housekeeping, caretaker for a community garden. They've put a lot of thought into what not only they need, but what will help make it a community. And I think that's pretty amazing. Way to work with them, Tanya.
Okay. Don't bring any more tears to her eyes. Okay, on the recommendation then, go ahead.
Okay, and I gotta give some accolades to our housing planner too, because I had her whipping these guys too. So it wasn't just me. And they were very, very thankful for Anna's assistance as well. The recommendation is that council provides first reading to official community plan amendment bylaw 1903 and zoning amendment bylaw 1904. And that council has considered whether the opportunities for consultation with one or more of the persons, organizations, and authorities should be early and ongoing, and direct staff to consult with the Cariboo Regional District, School District 28, LHTAKO DENE First Nation, Cluskas DENE Nation, the Esdela First Nation, the Southern Decath Nation Alliance, the Northern Health, and West Quesnel Business Association, and the council sets the public hearing date for April 7th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. at City Hall Council Chambers with the notice of public hearing to contain details of in-person and or electronic attendance if necessary for the public pending direction from legislation or any public health orders regarding COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay. Mover, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Runge, second. Questions or comments? Anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, next.
And finally, with regarding to housing, we're talking about the application for the Dollars for Doors, the Northern Development Initiative's Housing Incentive Program. The incentive program provides $10,000 per door, up to $200,000 per community. The city has received one application currently for a 24-unit apartment on Campus Way, but it would be considered incomplete. The proposed property is zoned for this use and is therefore shovel ready from the perspective of NDIT. Although this application is incomplete, staff are recommending to proceed to apply for the intake of funding, as we have been notified by NDIT that a May intake may not be available. I want to let council know, further to the details in here, that we have talked to NDIT and they have recommended that we do move on with applying at this stage with what we know of the development. So we're confident in, and we've had a number of conversations with them, so we're confident in going forth with the recommendation at this time. The recommendation is that council approves submission of an application for $200,000 to the Northern Development Initiative Trust Northern Housing Incentive Program.
Councillor Elliott, so moved. Councillor Rudenberg, second. Any questions or comments? Okay. Just Director Turner, what's your sense of when these proponents may be ready and we may start to see some of this at council? It's a little bit of blind faith on our part. We're trusting that you and your staff are working, with this proponent, that it's a legitimate submission. But do you have a sense of timing? Because I know they've gone back to the drawing board a couple of times and they're refining what they're doing.
Mayor, in all honesty, I'm not sure. I have made it known to Northern Initiative that I have a lot of uncertainties about whether we're going to proceed and what we're going to proceed with. But
and this is a pure market play, right?
Yes,
like this is a market development.
Correct, and that's all this initiative is available for.
Yeah, but I think it's important for council to be clear that we're in a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but if we can deliver and Northern Trust says, yes, you can apply this, it may help the proponent with their analysis of their business case. And so that's why I agree with the timing issue, but I also agree we need to be willing to leverage these dollars to see if we can push a market development, into existence, if you will. So anyway. The second question is if it doesn't proceed, the money just stays with Northern Trust. Is that correct?
Correct. And we've clarified with them there's no risk to us on a financial basis.
Okay. So everybody okay with that? All right. So on Councillor Runge, did you have a question?
Yeah, this question, I guess, is to Tanya. Should this proposal not go ahead, and hopefully it does go ahead, is there any, if another proponent came up, could that be moved to another one, or is it really just for this one only?
We will make every effort if there is a viable project to be had in this time frame that we will make that case.
Thank you.
Okay. So on the motion, anyone opposed? That motion is carried unanimously. Now, I want to make a comment that may bring tears to all of our eyes. I think this is probably the biggest development evening we've ever had as a council. Can you think of another time that, we've got a commercial one, we've got a number of housing ones, we've got a potential additional housing one. I've never seen this much development. And my understanding is there's even more kind of in the wings. Is that right, Director Turner?
We have a number of other proponents in the wings, that we're trying to move along for housing plays out.
Yeah. So I think kudos to everybody. I think this is something that we've been working on. We've positioned the community well. It fits back to our conversation that the city manager, was raising before. It's a derivative of what we've done on branding. on communicating to the community, our amenities, investments. I think it's just a whole bunch of stuff coming together, as well as the timing issue of the affordability crisis, as well as the COVID pushing people out of their urban centers. So, you know, I think it's great for our community to see this much interest and this much potential shovels in the ground. I see Councillor Paul and then Councillor Runge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually going to save this for the end of the meeting. But looking at all of the reports that Director Turner has put forward tonight and seeing all the work, how dare I even question the fact that she might not need some help. So my apologies to Director Turner.
Well done, Councillor Paul. Well done. Councillor Runge.
I think we're gonna have too many tears here. Really, congratulations to everybody who's made this happen. You know, over the, you know, we came into this, the new councillors, and you know, for me, it's just these things seem to be clicking perfectly, and there's so much in the wings still, and it's actually really quite exciting. And as I can see, real pressure being put on any kind of empty land as we continue on this path, because you know, as they pop up, it's like, whoa, what the heck's happening here in Quesnel? And it's really exciting. So, you know, thank you, Director Turner. Thanks, you know, all the other councillors that actually put this into play well before we started. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much. Before tissues get past Director Turner there, we'll move on. Coordinator Blair for our Northern Development Initiative Trust for the Food Hub.
Yeah, the purpose of this report is to gain council's approval to submit a Northern Development Initiative Trust Economic Infrastructure Grant application. The Economic Infrastructure Grant will build upon the $500,000 from the Ministry of Agriculture and $250,000 from the 2020 Northern Development Initiative Trust grants. The funding will be used to implement phase 2 of the Food Hub. Phase 1 of the Food Hub included renovations to the space leased at 101 Marsh Drive and purchased basic equipment, including a range combi oven, dishwasher, walk-in cooler and freezer, exhaust hood, planetary mixer, reach-in refrigerator, sinks, and some shelving and work tables. This project will encompass the capital purchases of further equipment identified in the implementation plan, including co-packing equipment, food lab testing equipment, specialized equipment for food processing, small wares and utensils, and additional workstations, work tables, and lockable storage and cabinets and shelving. The recommendation is that Quesnel City Council supports the application to the Northern Development Initiative Trust Economic Infrastructure Stream from the Cariboo Chilcotin Lillooet Regional Development Fund for the Food Hub Phase 2 project.
Thank you. On the recommendation, Councillor Rudenberg, Councillor Vic, second. Questions or comments? Just a question, Lindsay, or I don't, yeah, I think Amy's still on. Do we have an update on timing for the opening of the Food Hub for the renovations, etc.?
Sure, I can speak to that. So we're still aiming for March. There was a bit of a delay with our cooler and freezer panels getting delivered, but they are in the Food Hub as of today. So getting to work on getting that built, and that's the last piece. A little bit of equipment left to be installed, but March 1st is probably not going to happen, but hopefully by the end of March is what we're aiming for now.
And I'm assuming communications is ongoing with agriculture and the minister's office, etc. Okay. So
yeah.
As soon as we've got some harder dates, let me know as well, because I can speak directly to Minister Popham too. Okay.
Absolutely.
So on Councillor Vic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had two comments, and I'm really just extend my thanks to the team, Lindsay and Amy. The 30% contribution from the city, that's not a small point. That's great how we can leverage a prior grant to help cover our portion here. So the cost is to sort of net cost to the taxpayer is negated by that, which I think is phenomenal. And also these 6 elements that this grant will support, I think that just adds more to the engine here to help feed the success of this project writ large. And I just think this is fantastic. And I really appreciate the hard work that went into continuing to find ways to succeed and make this project fly when it does open. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So on that, I've got a mover and seconder. So on the recommendation, anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. And thank you again. I think this is, as Councillor Vic indicated, it's a great project, and it's nice to see we're already moving on to phase 2 before we've even opened phase 1. That's proactive. Okay. Next, then the BC Winter Games update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to deliver.
We have a recusal.
Yeah, sorry, we have a recusal. Councillor Goulet.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just because of my role as chairperson for School District 28, I will again excuse myself from the discussion.
Okay,
Well,
and we'll text you when we're done.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to update council on the status of the 2024 BC Winter Games bid. A resolution of partnership was provided to the city from LHTAKO DENE Nation. And we did receive resolutions for the city's bid from the school district and the Cariboo Regional District. In addition, a number of letters of support were provided from sporting venue holders, sports clubs and organizations. And there's a long list in the report of those organizations. Unfortunately, we did not receive one of the endorsements which were critical to the application. So as a result of not receiving that one endorsement which we needed, we could not submit a bid for this, for the Winter Games for 2024. So the recommendation with this report is that council directs staff to provide a letter to all of the potential partner organizations and those organizations thanking them. And, you know, maybe next go around, we will try again and reactivate this again at some point in the future. So the financial implications of that is that council's commitment of $10,000 and the Cariboo Regional District contribution of $55,000 in cash and in-kind support are no longer required for 2024.
Okay. Comments, questions, or motion? Councillor Runge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. I hear that the report is officially due, I think, this Friday. Is there any opportunity, because I also hear that the school board's also meeting, they have the meetings on Wednesdays, and I wish Tony was here because then we could ask him that question also, but is there any opportunity that we could maybe hold off on the cancellation until after we hear? Like, is there any chance that the school board might actually be revisiting this? Because I hear it was, you know, with one of their stakeholders, you know, I'm not sure if it was just a miscommunication more than anything. And I'd hate to see this bid fail on something that, you know, maybe we could still save at this time.
So so number one, it's not appropriate, just so we're clear, for Councillor Goulet to be involved. He can't wear two hats. And it's not, and he couldn't speak on behalf, just as I couldn't if I was in a similar situation on behalf of another elected body. But I believe Director Bolton's been on the phone, and it's also my understanding that we have been told that this would not, that the time is not there, and we've been told that it can't happen. So City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I've been told that myself from the manager of the school district, who says it was a pretty definitive vote against this by the group who voted against it. Said she didn't think it was possible to get it back on track for this one. In addition, when we heard that this thing did not receive that required approval, we stood down our community development coordinator from working on that whole application process. And it is a long and onerous application process. So I don't believe that we would have the time left remaining to get that application in for the deadline date. So there's two compounding factors there.
Councillor Vic, did I see your hand? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the city manager is sort of addressing my my question before I asked it. And as much as I understand what you've just said, I feel that that we shouldn't dismiss this this idea so quickly. Is there a possibility that we can submit the application incomplete because one would think that the vetting process for communities to hold these winter games is probably quite lengthy. And we could give by submitting the application incomplete with that one missing letter, would maybe give the time that they need to have those conversations within their organization to try and figure out the impasse. And then we could at such time provide that one missing letter to this application. We've come 95% of the way here. We've got letters from everybody, it seems, and it just seems a huge shame and frankly a waste of staff time that so much effort's already been put into this that we throw in the towel now.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I tried to confirm that exact point with our person who was doing the application process this afternoon. And we came to the conclusion that this is such an onerous process that we don't think that we could submit it on time if that's all she worked for the remainder of this week. It has to be down in their hands, hard copy by this Friday down in, I believe it's in Victoria. So it's not possible to do that at this point in time, in our opinion. In addition, I think we need, based on my conversations, I believe there's substantive issues separating here. This is not just a misunderstanding or something that they can just, talk out amongst themselves and figure it out. To me, it sounded like it was pretty substantive issues. That's my opinion only based on the conversations I've had. And I think substantive enough that those issues won't go away in the short term. If we're going to host this again, they need to figure out a different type of a model.
Okay, Councillor Vic for a follow-up, and I see.
I have a follow-up. Yep. Okay, thank you, Mr. City Manager. I understand that, and I appreciate that. That begs the question, in the future, one would hope that when other opportunities to host games come up, it would be terrible if we're in the same position again. What can be done to try and work with this partner to try and sort of preemptively address the issues, so the next time we come to a decision to make an application to winter games or summer games or whatever, that we don't have this problem. This just seems a crying shame.
City Manager.
Thank you. Those are good comments, and I think we need to take those comments away and work on it. And in particular, feed those comments back to the school district to do some consideration around as well. Because in this case, this application has been worked on for over a year, the first time when we put it out there, right? It's a long time. So if it's just a matter of spending time on it, there was enough time into this process. So I guess it's a perfectly valid outcome of this as we figure out what the holdups are and if we can work around those for the next time. Because Quesnel sees itself as a hosting community, and we need to figure out how to get all of our partners into that same mode of being a hosting community.
Yeah, and I would suggest, and you're intimating it, City Manager, it's not just with respect to the school district and the situation there or the missing endorsement letter. I think it's also the structure of the games themselves. I mean, they must have some mechanism that other communities have used, other school districts have used, et cetera, to be able to accommodate this. And maybe they need to look at their own model so that this kind of circumstance doesn't occur. So I think to Councillor Vic's point, a little bit of a debrief in working with partners proactively, so the next window opens up, we can proceed knowing that we can put a successful bid package in. So
yeah,
I have Councillor Rudenberg and then Councillor Paul.
Well, Councillor Vic kind of stole my thunder there, because that was where I was going to head was, okay, so I get that this particular bid is pretty much closed, but I wanted to, how we can move forward and what kind of work or how, what kind of partnership are we looking at with the partners that didn't feel comfortable in giving us a letter of support? How do we make that work? as I think we've said earlier tonight, how do we get to yes with that group if we're looking at becoming this host community, as the mayor has said, that we want to be? So just reiterating basically what Councillor Vic has said.
Okay, Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you. We do have one card up our sleeve, and that is the fact that I know we're looking at the 2024 games, but let's not lose sight of the fact that 4 years down the road from that, 2028 is our 100th anniversary. And maybe that's the target we should be aiming at.
Interesting.
Maybe it's all a plot because you've been trying to get us to put money aside for that 100th anniversary. You've engineered us getting that on that. No, that's an interesting alignment. So I think if we can do some work and the bid package is open, then there's another opportunity for us to celebrate our community. So
This bid package did encompass the 2026 BC Winter Games as well. It was 2024 winter and summer, and then 2026 winter.
okay. And then what's the next cycle then? Is it 2028?
It'll be 2028, yeah, but no information is posted on their website.
Okay, super. Thank you. Okay, so on the recommendation, then I do not have a motion to that effect. Staff's recommendation. Councillor Vic, so moved. Seconded. Councillor Rudenberg. And I know there's lots of reluctance there, folks, but so we have the recommendation moved and seconded. Any further questions, comments? Anyone opposed? Thank you. And Lindsay, thank you very much for the work done on this. I know that you're probably disappointed yourself that we couldn't advance that. So, but we do appreciate the effort that you put into it. So, okay. Wow, that was back fast. I didn't even give Gina permission to text you yet. That's taking liberties, I would say. Okay, moving on then, receive council information package. Any questions or comments on that? No items were pulled forward. The correspondence.
Oh, wait, Mayor, we're doing the bylaw readings. Sorry, yeah.
What?
We received correspondence from Cariboo Regional District dated February 8th to 2021 to Mayor and Council asking for an appointment of a CRD representative to the NCLGA board for 2021 and an alternate. Or no, sorry, that's theirs.
Yeah, that's yours.
Yep.
So is anybody interested in working up the value chain and NCLGA there? Okay, seeing none. It's not mandatory that we appoint someone. So, okay. All right. Thank you. Now we can move on to bylaws, Ms. G.
Sorry
Okay.
about that.
We're going to stand down item 1 as per our conversation. We're going to continue to work on that electronic meetings and attendance. So then bylaw 1903 official community plan amendment for Hoy Street, first reading, and of course the rest of the information as per our discussion. Councillor Elliott so moved. Councillor Rudenberg second. Any comments or questions? Anyone opposed? That motion is carried unanimously. And then the zone amendment for the same for Hoy Street, first reading. Councillor Elliott so moved. Councillor Runge second. Questions or comments? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? No one's opposed. Okay, thank you. No changes to upcoming meeting schedule, although we will give you notification of the ad hoc public safety and policing one if you want to come in and walk through the strategic plan for the detachment and in advance of a presentation, a more fulsome presentation of council later on. No changes to committee appointments, announcements, future events. Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make note of the fact that there will be a second dog sled mail run. And the reason for that is that because of COVID rules, we could only have, I think, a maximum of 3 dog teams in the first run, which happened at the end of January. The next one's coming up within the next couple of weeks. I'm not allowed to tell you when and where because we don't want any spectators. But one thing that you can do And that is that you can go to sleddogmailrun.ca and you can purchase an envelope either online or in person. There are several places around town where you can buy an envelope. In fact, I sent an envelope to my cousin in England, and my cousin in England just sent me back an email this morning that said that he has purchased a dog sled mail run envelope online from England for his granddaughter in England. So these things go all over the world. The deadline is February the 24th for purchasing envelopes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, did I see your hand?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, kind of a different one as far as announcements, but Miss Albers will be leaving us soon. And
Hey, whoa,
Yes,
what are you doing?
I wanted to ask if this is her last meeting.
That was going to be my announcement and future event.
And I was also going to clarify that I don't think she's ever asked for your permission for anything.
That's true. Well, that was a nice segue into my announcement. And so Councillor Elliott has let the cat out of the bag. This is the real kind of Kleenex moment of the evening. But Gina, this I have been told is your last meeting in your role as our Deputy Corporate Officer. And I'm just going to open up the floor for council. So you're about to be blasted with love. Thank you very much. It was really a godsend to have you in that position when I took the seat as mayor, and you've been great to work with. Great to get that high-pitched laugh at least one council meeting. I keep notes of it at my desk there. It gives me great pleasure. And I want to thank you for your service. It was great to have you working for the city. And I saw your husband up at the ski hill the other day there and was bugging him that, now he can start to plan adventures with you, because I know you like to get outside and do fun things together. So we're going to miss you. Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, hard ditto on that, Gina. It's been wonderful working with you. You always keep us on track. You always keep us moving forward. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with you for so many years. So good luck with your future. Good luck with the knitting. And I hope you learn how to fly cast off of that dock of yours with your husband. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other council members? Councillor Paul?
Thank you, Gina. Well done. As a retired deputy clerk / city clerk, you've done a wonderful job, and welcome to the club. Thank you.
Councillor Vic?
It's a scary club.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gina, I just want to say thank you, obviously, but obviously my perspective a little bit different. Only been at this for a couple of years, and my thanks goes to even day one when I didn't know how the hell to fill out those forms, and you took the time and you were patient, and yeah, thank you.
Councillor Runge?
Yeah, I think it's a ditto all around. Gina, I don't know how to say thank you, not only for what you've done here at the city, but also for advice with all the stuff that's been going on, bringing tears to my eyes. Hey, we're really going to miss you. Thanks for everything.
Councillor Goulet, I think I saw your hand go up.
Yep, thank you. And as well, I ditto all the comments that have been made. You'll surely be missed, Gina, in the position that you've had as the deputy clerk. And I ditto to Mitch's, my first kick at the can here. First met you, filling out the papers, and just great to get to know you. So thanks, Gina.
And can you do it between sniffles, Councillor Rudenberg?
Well, I was just thinking, it doesn't matter how many dittos I've heard here. I don't think it really says enough for everything that Gina has done for us. And, when I heard that she was leaving, I was misty-eyed, and I promised I wouldn't be like this during this meeting, but oh well, it is what it is. I would think she'd think less of me if I didn't cry. Gina has always been there for us. And, you know, one of those rare personalities that could tell you off and you say thank you. You do. and it's been appreciated because she's kept us out of the muck. She's the one that's had to keep us on the straight and narrow so that we don't get our crap in trouble. And it's been appreciated for all these years. And I know she's got great things planned, you know, for the future. She's gonna sit back and enjoy her glass of wine and go, oh my God, why didn't I do this sooner? But Gina, thank you for being you. And I like to say I can call you my friend. So thank you.
Well done, Councillor Rudenberg. You kept it together. There was not a sob in any of that.
I nailed it.
Although, Gina, I want to come by on the kayak one time, seeing you into your third glass of wine, trying to fly cast with your knitting. I think that would be exciting to see. So, anyway, you're much loved, as you can tell, and we are going to miss you. And I know staff will do right as well on their end, and you know, lots of emojis and lots of virtual hugs. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And I'd just like to say it's been an absolute pleasure working with all of you, including staff, and I'll miss you.
Great, thank you. And with that, we'll finish the formalities. Any gallery questions? Seeing none signaled, I would invite a motion to adjourn. Councillor Elliott so moved. Councillor Runge second. Anyone opposed? Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your evening.